ladies and gentlemen. I am Biaspal Chaudhary, the Deputy Director of Father Leblon School.
And I am Mukul Paul Chaudhary, the Co-Deputy Director of FLS.
Before we begin today's webinar, allow me to take this opportunity on the 74th Independence Day of our country to wish all our esteemed speakers, students, teachers, parents, and our dear audience a very happy Independence Day. We welcome and thank you for being with us here today. For those of you who are new to our channels, Father Leblon School is a residential school with a few seats for day boarders located in the very scenic foothills of Darjeeling. The school was established in the year 2000 and over the years has earned the reputation as an institution of excellence where we celebrate the ethos of imparting knowledge that is wholesome and multidimensional. We were nothing short of ecstatic to see the vision document of the new education policy that was announced on the 29th of July 2020. The country has waited 30 long years for an upgrade in the way children learn. Significant changes have taken place in our society, economy, country, and the world at large, and it goes without saying that important questions must be asked as to whether the current system is preparing our children for the 21st century or not. The long overdue change has been welcomed by people all over the country, although we are seeking a lot of clarity regarding its implication and implementation. Therefore, this Independence Day, Father Leblon School has taken the initiative to bring to you stalwarts in the education sector to give you an overview of the NEP and then discuss some important points. It is indeed a very thorough document, so we have picked out 4 key points to begin with for this webinar. Each speaker will highlight one point and then we will request each of our speakers to give us their valuable inputs on the specific points discussed. We will also be taking questions during this time. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box below. We shall try to address as many as we can accommodate.
Without any further delay, allow me to introduce to you the exceptional speakers of this evening. They have had immense contribution in building so many lives of children and teachers and are veterans of the education industry. Allow me to introduce to you Miss Suvina Shunglu, who has so gracefully accepted our invitation to be here with us today. She is an alumni of La Martini for Girls Lucknow and a postgraduate in history from Lucknow University. She is the founding principal and the joint secretary of Sri Sri Academy, Kolkata. Under her leadership, Sri Sri Academy is now known as one of the best schools in India. She is an academic council member of the SSRVM Trust, which has 93 schools under it and is also a mentor to many schools. She has recently become a part of the steering committee for the implementation of the NEP 2020 in all the schools under the trust in Bangalore. Thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing this webinar with your presence.
Next on our panel, we have Mrs. Devika Nadig. I have had the privilege of knowing ma'am personally, and she has been such an inspiration to me and I'm sure to many others. She was born and raised in Jabalpur in close proximity to the forests and even now lives in the beautiful hills of Girivan. She has been engaged in the domain of school education for the past 3 decades. Her work is focused on the pursuit of teacher excellence in education, which she beautifully describes as a journey without an end. Armed with an MA in English Literature and B.Ed from Mumbai University, Mrs. Nadig gathered rich and meaningful experiences in the domain of education by teaching in schools in Mumbai and Pune before taking on the mantle of leading a large school in Pune as its principal and academic director for 12 years. She is the co-founder of Shikshangan Education Initiatives, Pune, along with Mr. Vijay Gupta, and the scope of their work includes teacher development by sharpening their pedagogical skills and working with school leaders on their instructional and organizational leadership skills, thereby building the right environment for schools to become high-performing, world-class schools. Shikshangan's work spans across the country, encompassing all of India's diversity in terms of socio-economic setting of our rural schools, the rigor of our regular schools, and the glamour of our international schools. I am one of her students, and I can say this with a lot of conviction that I couldn't have asked for better mentors. She has been my guide and friend through and through, They have helped Father Leblon's school in its journey towards meaningful education and continue to do so. We are very grateful to Devika ma'am and Vijay sir for their endless support.
Our third speaker for the evening was my teacher and principal when I was a student at La Martini for Boys, Kolkata, Mr. Sunirmal Chakravarti. He is a role model to countless students and is also an exceptional orator. Even today, I am all ears when I hear you speak, sir. Mr. Sunirmal Chakravarti studied in Darjeeling, Calcutta, and New Delhi before joining St. Paul's School, Darjeeling, as an assistant master. He went on to serve the school as house master and senior master before joining the Martini for Boys, Calcutta, as principal. He retired from his position in 2015. He describes himself as a teacher by choice and principal by accident. Happily retired, he now indulges in his twin passion of trekking in the mountains and rediscovering our country by road. He is also a member of our governing body and has been extremely kind to always give us the right advice and steer the school in the right direction. We are extremely grateful to you, sir, for being such a pillar of strength for FLS.
Thank you very much, Mukul. Thank you.
The next member on our panel is Mr. Vijay Gupta, who co-founded Shikshangan in 2008 and have already mentioned the exceptional work Shikshangan has been doing to ensure good learning for every child. Mr. Vijay has earlier worked with Wipro Corporation in various roles, including with Azim Premji Foundation. He is a BTech from IIT Kanpur and has done his MBA from IIM Bangalore. He is our first speaker for this evening and shall give us an overview of the NEP and shall further discuss the implementation timeline that the government has proposed. Over to you, Vijay sir. Sir, you're muted.
You are muted.
Yeah. Okay, I've unmuted myself, but I think all the other speakers should mute themselves because there's a lot of background echo which is coming.
I think only Mukul can do that.
Therefore, let me. Okay, all right. Maybe you can also mute yourself. So I'm sharing my screen. Application window. I can't share the screen, looks like.
So would you like me to help out?
I think,
so
I think
your,
you do that.
the NEP 2020.ppt, that's your file, right, sir?
Just share that. And I will just ask you to do the next.
Right, sir.
All right, so I'll get started. And my job is to give you an overview of the policy as well as some idea about the implementation time. And I've been given about 15 minutes and I'm keeping track of the time. Next, Mukul, next, yeah. Some background is essential. Okay, one thing which we need to understand that NEP 2020 is a policy document. That means whenever we talk about the policy, it is talking about the intention. Next. And therefore, this has to be followed by the implementation. That means we also need to work out how the implementation happens. For example, in this NEP, if you read NEP, you would find that they're talking about NCF 2020, National Curriculum Framework 2020. And that will be one of the implementation documents. Next. What I want to say is that it is not that India has been working in a policy vacuum. There are at least two earlier policies which have happened, 1968 and 8692, etc., etc. And the last one, 8692, also led to NCF 2005, National Curriculum Framework. Why I'm highlighting this? Because many of the younger people might have got this impression that this is the first time we are getting a policy. Okay, India never works in policy vacuum. There's always a policy. And therefore, this policy is also another one which is coming. Next. What I want to highlight is, because I'm also supposed to talk about the implementation timeline and so on, just to remind you that this NEP 2020 has taken 5 years to see the light of the day, as well as actually one change of the chairman, because one chairman died as well. So also keep this in mind, that these things do take time. Next, Mukul. What I want to highlight is that it is important to see in what context this policy is coming in. Otherwise, we lose track of why this policy. And therefore, if you read the document and even otherwise, the biggest issue which is facing this country as far as education system is concerned is just this quality of learning. And what I want to highlight is quality of learning at all levels. While we might be talking about the primary schools and school education, but this issue is applicable across the board. And one can argue that probably higher education is actually in even like worse situation. Next. When we talk about the quality, we are basically talking about quality which is away from rote learning. Rote learning is usually associated with low quality. That means we are just memorizing without understanding. And therefore, when we talk about quality, we are saying away from rote learning, and therefore we talk about critical thinking. That means we should be able to evaluate the idea, the pluses, minuses. We talk about problem solving. We talk about learning to learn. We talk about creative thinking, multidisciplinary. All these words basically describe the quality. And therefore, when we evaluate a policy, it is important to evaluate the policy from that angle, that this is the issue which we are trying to address. If we have time later, I will also be able to supply some critique of the policy. Let's see how much time we have. This country also faces a large issue, which is about equity. Equity means that are we able to get all our young children, all our young into good quality education, whether they are living in cities or village, whether they are high income, low income, etc. And therefore, this document also addresses the point. But right now, we won't talk about this. Why? Because largely our audience here, whoever is locked in, is largely from private schools. And therefore, our focus, or my focus, will be from the angle of quality and not so much from the equity angle. But the NEP talks about this as well. Next, Mukul. And therefore, now I am describing the salient features. Salient features means that what are the changes? And therefore, if something has not changed, it is the same which has been discussed in the earlier policy. I'm not talking about that. And therefore, I'm highlighting those which have seen some change. So one change which is being talked about is early childhood care and education. But let me also emphasize, this is again more from the government school angle. Our children, rich and privileged, have been going to so-called preschool in all the city. But if you know, the government schools start from grade 1. They don't have any preschool, and therefore the government has a system of Anganwadi. And idea is that young children will go to Anganwadi. They will get at least good one good meal, but there's no education per se. And therefore, what government is thinking, that is it possible to combine the Anganwadis with the school, the government school? And therefore, I'm also highlighting that this is not an issue as far as the private school is concerned. Next one. Next, Mukul. And therefore, this policy says that NCERT will develop a curricular and pedagogical framework for the age group 0 to 8 years. That means from the birth to 8 years, that means up to grade 2. NCERT will develop a curricular and pedagogical framework. What does it mean? They will define what children should learn, that means the curricular, and how they will learn, which is pedagogical. And that is the job of NCERT. Let's see how much time do they take to develop that. Next, Mukul. And therefore, this policy looks at school education as an integrated 15-year process, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, which all of you must have seen. 5 years means actually 3 years of preschool and 2 years of school up to grade 2. Then there is a 3 year of grade 3, 4, 5, another 3 years of so-called middle school, 6, 7, 8. And then we have got 4 years of secondary education, lower secondary and higher secondary. Next. This policy, I think it is for the first time also emphasizes the idea of how to learn. And they highlight the fact that in this fast-changing world, it is very difficult to decide what children should learn, which will remain relevant. Because remember, whatever we are teaching children in the school today, they will go in the job market, employment market after 10 years, 15 years time. Sitting in 2020, it's very difficult to predict what kind of jobs are there. You might have read horror story of artificial intelligence, and therefore it's very possible that none of the jobs which we are doing will remain. And therefore, this policy says that what is more important is to train children on how to learn, so that whatever work they are doing or wherever they are, they know how to learn, they know how to understand, they know how to critique. And that is what is a very nice emphasis. Next, Mukul. This I think is interesting. What this policy is envisaging, that instead of looking at a school year as one long year, is it possible to break it down into semester system? Okay, that means each year will have 2 semesters. How does it help? It helps by offering the students more courses, more choice, more flexibility. And therefore, those of you who have gone to the higher education and into semester system, I've gone through 2 such semester system. I went to IIT, there used to be 2 semesters every year. And then I went to IIM, very interesting, they used to have 3 semesters in a year. That means each semester was just about 3 months. How it helps is that we can offer variety of courses. Also, remember, there's also a downside to it. It is possible to argue that maybe children will become jack of all trade, whether they will also become master of some or not. And therefore, that is something which we need to worry about. Next. It also talks about actually content to be reduced, because from the angle of rote, because of large content, I think the whole attempt by the teacher is to get the content done, actually somehow memorize, and there's no focus on thinking about whatever we are learning and whether we have views on that. Next. This is interesting. This document talks a lot about multilingualism. As we all know, young children can learn a lot of languages. Also, to remind you, I have not put here mother tongue. Mother tongue, teaching in mother tongue is a very old idea. Okay, and as you can appreciate, and as it will be also talked about sustainable as well later on, that it is an idea which is great, but is very complex to implement in this country. Okay, because we don't know what is a mother tongue. In fact, the mother tongue can be very different from the state language. It can also be very different from the standard form of the language. If you go to UP, for example, the Hindi which is being talked about in Western UP and Eastern UP is very different. It's all Hindi, as well as Bihar and Rajasthan. It's all under the umbrella of Hindi. But what is the mother tongue? Very difficult to decipher. And therefore, while we talk about mother tongue, I think we will continue to do the way we are doing. But this policy is interesting from the angle of multilingualism, which means that it's saying that is it possible to get children to learn several languages and not just restrict to Hindi or English or whatever is the state language. It also talks about Sanskrit and so on, because the hue of the government is this, and therefore they talk about Sanskrit. And since they have talked about Sanskrit, they also have to talk about other classical languages. Otherwise, there's a protest from South India and so on. And therefore, largely, I think the idea is that this policy is trying to say that is it possible to get our children to learn several languages, including foreign languages. Next, Mukul. And therefore, it is also attempting that in the light of this policy, we need to reform our curriculum and so on to bring in these ideas of multilingualism, semester, content, etc., etc. And therefore, those of you who are aware about earlier policy, there was a wonderful document which was brought out in 2005, which is called NCF 2005, National Curriculum Framework. And the same framework is to be revised, and it has a very aggressive target, and I want to highlight that aggressive target of end 2020, and we're sitting in August. And I'm told, whatever I've read, is that they haven't even formed the steering committee, and therefore it will be a huge task. I remember 2005 took about 18 months of very rigorous work and lots of committees and so on. And therefore it might take actually more than whatever is being promised. But this is interesting that it is to be updated every 5 years. And therefore, this is a good news. Okay, Mukul, next. This document also talks about more formative assessment than like rote testing. Those of you who are coming from CBSE would be very familiar with CC in formative assessment. And therefore, it was a very great idea, which was implemented for some 7, 8, 9 years, and then it got dropped. And therefore, we need to worry about as to why it did not take shape. It is a wonderful idea, and therefore, even the policy is talking about, we also need to worry about as to why it did not happen, why it failed. Next. And therefore, in the light of this whole thing which we are doing in terms of curriculum and like assessment, this policy also talks about that reform of board examinations as well as entrance examinations to the higher education. It also talks about the role of coaching, etc., etc. I don't know how much it can be done, but what it is saying that we will reform these examination system, because it is possible to argue that large part of rote is happening because of examination, because the way the board examination, whether CBSE or ICSE otherwise, are actually asking. And therefore, hopefully, based on the NCF, these reforms will also happen. And the NEP also promises that we will be able to implement all this stuff, and this looks reasonable from the academic session 22-23 in terms of exams and the as well as a curriculum, formative assessment, etc. This looks like a reasonable target. Next, Mukul. Policy also talks, actually says a little vaguely. It says that all the states will also conduct their own examination at the end of grade 3, 5, and 8. And the whole idea seems to be that we want to track whether learning outcome is happening. Also remember, this examination is not from doing any pass and fail. This is only to keep track whether students are learning whatever we want them to learn. Next. No, just go back. This is important. Here is something important, something different which has not been tried out, and therefore I want to dwell on this for a minute. The policy talks about setting up a national assessment center for school education, and this will be given the task of setting learning standards. Those of you who are actually familiar with the learning and the way the schools are organized in the Western countries, they talk about learning standard. That means for each grade and each subject, they specify what exactly children should learn, which we have never specified. We only do board examination. And therefore, this is an important change. Hopefully, the center will do a great job. And once they set these learning standards in terms of what children should learn, hopefully, this will also flow into the curriculum framework, etc., etc., as well as it will also advise the board examination reforms. Next, Bukul. We already have this NTA, National Testing Agency, and what this policy is saying that NTA will do all the testing for the entire country for all the entrance into higher education. Let's see how it happens. Obviously, it will happen in multiple languages, and let's see how it works out. Next. The policy also talks about vocational education, and which has been a very, it has been idea like rote learning, and which has been there for last 40, 50 years, but never got done. I believe I have some ideas on that. I think it also links up with our cultural heritage. Our cultural heritage has always highlighted the mind over body. And therefore, vocational education has traditionally been seen that it is meant for dropouts. Those who can't cope with so-called CBSE, etc., they will do vocational education. It looks like a tall order. Let's see how it works out. Next one. Good. Yeah, this is interesting. Every state will be mandated to set up a state school standards authority, which will lay down the guideline that this is the kind of school, maybe in terms of infrastructure, otherwise, etc. And every school which wants to start a new private school will have to get a license kind of thing, license to start a school from this. And therefore, let's see how it works out. Right now, for example, whenever you want to get affiliation with CBSE or ICSE, there is a whole process of affiliation, something like that, but there is a state level body which will be done. Next. As you can imagine, that there is a RT, there is a law, right to education, especially for the underprivileged, and how do we ensure that they get RT and age from 1 to 8. Now this policy is talking about from the preschool. Remember that 15 years, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. For the entire period, how do we make sure that RT is applicable? And therefore, RT will also get reviewed in the light of NEP 2020. Next, Mukul. This is important. Okay, teacher quality. So some ideas on how is the policy envisaging to improve the teacher quality. One, that they are trying to strengthen the so-called TETs, teacher eligibility test. I don't know how many of you have gone through it. And actually the pass percentage has been very low, and therefore people have been thinking about how to improve this. And therefore one way to improve the quality is to make this TET strengthened and for all the stages of school education. Next, Mukul. This idea about school complexes is more applicable to the government school. The idea is that government has a lot of small schools which are primary schools, 1 to 5, 1 to 8, and then there is a large secondary school. And therefore, there's always the issues of resources which the so-called small schools don't have. And therefore, government is envisaging to form school complexes there where one secondary school actually becomes a hub, and they take care of some 10, 15, 20 other schools, primary schools. Why I'm mentioning here, even though I mentioned that we are talking about private school, it is possible that some of your schools, private schools, might also be asked to give, might also be tasked with this job. You might be told that you become the school complex hub, and you take care of this, and therefore it is important to know this. Next, Mukul. This is another interesting idea. Hopefully, it will bring about change. And therefore, they're saying that we will also like define the national professional standards for teacher. That means what kind of teachers we are looking for. Okay, what makes a good teacher, and they will define that, and they are by like 2022, and then it will be revised every 10 years. Hopefully, this will also help in designing our B.Ed program, the pre-service program. This is an important step which is being envisaged. Next. This is interesting. One of the things which policy is saying that they don't like the standalone B.Ed colleges. There are a lot of such B.Ed colleges which are like business shops which are operating across the country, and therefore they are envisaging that all such colleges will be stopped or like shut, or they will have to merge with one large college or university. And there's a lot of emphasis on multidiscipline. That means you can't just have one department like education. If you want to have education, you should also have sociology and psychology and philosophy and many more things, etc. So let's see how it works out. Why I'm highlighting this is that a lot of these B.Ed colleges are run by politicians. Okay, let's see how it works out. Then this policy also talks about 4-year integrated B.Ed program, which means after 12th standard, and they will be conducting a national test, and through that they will be recruiting. At the same time, we will also have the so-called 2-year program, which has to be done after the graduation, or with the graduation of 3 years. Okay, next. And like I mentioned, that admission into this 4-year integrated program will happen through a national test, and through that they will recruit, and hopefully they will find the best people to join the teaching. Next, Mukul. After the NCF last policy, NCF 2005, which was done for the students for the school, there was also an NCF which was created for teacher education. That means what should be the curriculum for the teacher education, which was created at that time, sometime in 2009 or 10. And therefore, this policy is saying that that document will also get revised. But we need to worry about that, since we already had a document and didn't make much difference. So let's see what difference this document will make. Next. Just 2 features about higher education, because it also impacts us, impacts the school education. Like I mentioned, this policy is putting a lot of emphasis on multidisciplinary colleges and universities. They're basically saying that we want each university and college to become a multi-department kind of situation, where there's a lot of sharing and talking, etc., etc. We don't want standalone kind of places. And therefore, it is possible that even the IITs, although the IITs also have several departments, but who knows? And therefore, the whole attempt is that we want to create wonderful universities which are multidisciplinary, which have a large base, and therefore we will stop those small colleges, individual colleges which are existing dime a dozen. That's the aim, and the aim is that by 2030, 2040, we will remove this. Next, Mukul. There's another idea that which we have been debating, etc. And therefore, there's another idea that foreign universities would also be allowed to set up campuses in this country. Let's see how it happens. because the concern is that if those foreign universities come, our best people from the Indian universities will move there, and therefore our so-called Indian universities might again become very actually bereft of the talent. Let's see how it works out. Um, I think that's about it. I will actually stop here. This is a bit about critique. But I don't know whether we have time to say this here, Mukul. Shall I run through this critique as well? 2 slides.
Yes, so you can finish
Okay,
up
okay,
this slide.
fine. Okay, next.
Okay.
So here is some critique which I thought might be useful to do that. Remember, I mentioned that the main issue which this country is facing is about the quality of teaching and learning. And therefore, let's see as to what are the positive measures and what more needs to be done. Okay, here are the positive measures as per Vijay Gupta. One, I'm very hopeful of this NACSE. It's a mouthful of an acronym. So this center, as I mentioned, is supposed to set the learning standards for school education. Hopefully, we'll do a great job and we will get it implemented, and that therefore that will lift us from actually morass of rote learning. Let's see whether we are able to succeed. Next. There's a lot of emphasis on formative assessment. Like I mentioned, that this is an idea which has been tried and we have not been able to succeed. Let's see how it works out. Hopefully, we'll be able to do a better job and with better understanding. And one other actually positive measure which can lift us on the quality issue is the National Professional Standard for Teachers. Hopefully, we'll do a great job here, and we will recruit teachers accordingly, and we will make sure that our B.Ed programs are aligned to that, and therefore we'll be able to do a better job in terms of the teacher quality. Next. Here is some critique from Vijay Gupta, and in terms of quality. That means what is that which the policy is not doing, which I think is required to be done. If you like look at the countries across the globe, those who are doing great job in terms of quality of learning, they are able to do one thing which is very good. They are able to attract their best people into teaching at all levels, not just at the university level. At all levels, they are able to attract the best people to teach. Unless we do that as a society, my guess is that we will not be able to lift the quality of learning. And therefore, I don't see any measure as to how the government or the system actually plans to attract the best people to join our teaching. Okay, next one. One other thing which those who are doing well in education do is that there is research at all levels, and not just at the university and in the research labs. It is important that at all stages, including school, people should be doing research. There's small research in terms of what is working, what is not working, why it is not working, is there a better way of doing. If you like look at the US, you would find that school teachers are doing wonderful research. And I believe that unless there is a research culture, we will not be able to improve the quality. And therefore, the teaching, learning, and research goes hand in hand. Next. One idea which I like to suggest is that one of the things which like can be done is to attract our best people. There are a lot of Indians who are living abroad and they are doing great job. Nobel Prize winners, etc. Whether we can get them back here to set up universities. Universities are set up by human beings who are able to attract other great human beings, other intellectuals. That is how great universities are. And therefore, on that note, let me also mention one such attempt which was made and which has failed. You might remember about Nalanda University. I'm not talking about Nalanda of 8th century AD. I'm talking about Nalanda, which was to be set up by like Dr. Amartya Sen, our Nobel Prize winner. What happened? He was given resources, etc., and he was stationed here and so on. But unfortunately, after the new government came in, and because he got into a scrap of that whole project has been dropped, and Nalanda University is no longer there. And therefore, we need to attract our best people and help them to like set up great universities. And that brings me to the last point. Mukul, one more click. Yeah. Now go back. Yeah. Remember, this document talks about critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Critical thinking means that I'm able to evaluate an idea, I'm able to say what is good, what is not good, it also means I can have a different idea from you. And therefore, unless we allow universities to be places of free thinking, you will not be able to create critical thinking. You can't have the students doing critical thinking and teachers not doing it, or the bosses not doing it. Why I'm highlighting is I just want to highlight the episodes of JNU and Jadavpur universities. In any university ranking by Indian government, JNU and Jadavpur always rank top. But what have we done? We have branded them anti-national and so on and so forth. What are we doing? If we find some idea which is different from ours, we say that no, this is not acceptable. You are anti-national. And these days, people have coined such words like urban naxals and left liberal. What is liberal? Liberal idea of liberal thinking is that I can have a different view. That's the whole idea of liberal education. But I believe that unless we do this, we will only be talking about rote learning, critical thinking. After 10 years, we'll be actually coming back and doing the same thing. That's about it, Bakul. Thank you. So do we have any questions or should we go to the next session?
Right. Thank you so much, Vijay, sir. That was truly enlightening. For all our viewers, that was the NEP simplified for all of us. We do have a question for you, sir.
Yeah.
Which is a question that a lot of people have asked in the comment section.
Right.
Will the introduction of the NEP ultimately lead to the formation of a single board for the entire country?
I know a lot of people have been asking that, and therefore, simple answer to that is no. Okay, that means that we will continue to have CBSE and ICSE and the state board, and India is too diverse to have this slogan, which you are probably emphasizing: one nation, one board. I think one nation, one ration card is good enough. One nation and one Aadhaar card is good enough. We don't need to do one nation and one board. India is too diverse. We don't need to beat this country into one shape. The day we do that, okay, we will create so much friction, so much conflict that this country will break apart. And therefore, I hope the government and the rulers of this country listen to that. And I think if they do that, this will be a very bad attempt. But as for the policy is concerned, it is not saying anything like that. So don't worry about that. Not at least for next 5 years.
Very well said, sir. Now I will request our panel members to give their perspective on the discussion that we've had so far. We shall begin with Mrs. Suvina Shunglu. Ma'am, over to you.
I think this has been so comprehensive, so brave, so honest. Look at almost all aspects of NEP. That I feel that you've touched upon almost everything. However, the topic that I'm supposed to address, which is of universal access and equity, comes more from the heart. And this was very objectively done. I really have nothing to say because I think it's really laid it out very well. But I'll come in next and then I will connect with what you said, right? Because we focused on quality from the point of view of the education that we think that matters, urban education, private unaided schools, universities. This is a huge country that is not getting education. And I see those children every day when I go to school and I come back. And somewhere today on this year, on Independence Day, we as a country need to do something. We can't stay here like this for the next 10 years. So for me, it's a passionate plea. I really believe, I'm really happy that you've given me the topic and I'll come back to it when my chance comes. But I think it was very, very fabulously done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving over to Mr. Chakravarti. Sir, could you share your views on this topic and also throw some light on the fate of all the boards in our country?
Well, first of all, congratulations, Vijay. That was very comprehensive, very clear, and very well laid out. I mean, I don't think we can complain about how clearly he came across. Just a couple of things before I come to that board issue. First of all, Vijay talked about the fact that the policy stresses on quality, quality education, quality teacher training, quality in every sphere of educational life. But I think this hinges on how much money we can spend on producing this quality. And that issue where it says, where the policy says, hopefully that the central government will spend 6% of the GDP, I hope that won't be a pipe dream that goes down the pipe drain. Because I think the whole issue on quality depends on how much money we can spend. For instance, I mean, just to take up that issue about the Anganwadi workers, they're overstrained at the moment. And now we're going to give them the responsibility of also teaching preschool children, hopefully with some training. And that training is going to cost money. Do we have the money, or is this just table talk? Two, will these Anganwadi workers, sincere and hardworking as they are, really be able to take on that extra load and carry out that very, very crucial role of handholding these children into a school life? I have my doubts about that. And honestly, and consider this, we're thinking in terms of quality education from on behalf of the Anganwadi workers. Perhaps we should first think about paying them their salaries that they haven't received. Forget about everything else and other investments that need to be made there. But at the other extreme, what Vijay said about universities being centers of free thinking, this is a matter of grave doubt and great concern. I have to say this. I mean, every day that we read the papers or follow news, not on television, mind you, because the television news doesn't cover this, but it's very worrying how teachers, how dissenting voices, um, how people who have a different opinion from the current leaders in government, how they are being harassed, how they are being put behind bars, and this is a matter of grave concern because if we have a an order at the moment which thinks to a great deal in a sort of a blinkered vision, and they would like all of us to have that kind of blinkered vision. But a university is just not the place for that. And I hope wisdom dawns on the people who are in positions to make decisions that they need to leave the universities alone. As far as the boards are concerned, Mukul, to answer your question, I honestly think, and I agree with Vijay again, if we try and coalesce all these boards into one, we're going to kill the diversity in our country. I'll come to that later when I'm speaking about my own topic about multilingual education. But honestly, to sort of dovetail all these boards and make them into one humongous body, I think is asking for trouble. I think it's also asking for creating a situation where instead of decentralizing, this idea to try and centralize is a matter of concern, and I hope that doesn't happen. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was very well thought and very well put. And coming back to your first point, the NEP sounds like a great plan, and its success depends on the implementation. But I also cannot help but wonder, where is the money going to come from? We know, like sir mentioned, that the government has set a target of investing 6% of the GDP, up from the current 3% into education. And my question to Mrs. Devika Nadik would be that will this amount suffice for such a major overhaul? The second part of my question is how private schools are going to cope up with the amount of investment that is required for a complete implementation of the NEP. Do you think the government is going to have any role to play in this? Ma'am, unmute.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, one thing that I do not want to do is have any kind of a political discussion. Okay. Because we are assuming certain things. The policy hasn't mentioned anywhere about a single board. and we are imagining that something like this will happen. I don't think that that's mentioned anywhere in the policy. About free thinking, we can hope that there will be free thinking. Governments will change and the policy will last for a pretty long time, because this policy took 30 years, by the way, to come in. Okay. And we do not know when the next policy will come, and we do not know how long certain governments might last. So, but it's good to raise these questions undoubtedly. And I appreciate the candid views across this platform, but I don't want to go into the political angle, because I am going to focus, and I'm coming to your question as well, Bias. But my presentation today is focused on what can we do right here, right now, based on what the policy is trying to suggest, and not really get into these imaginings of what might happen and what the government might be thinking, or what some future governments might think. To answer your question, I do not know where that 6% is going to come from, but I do want to point out that this is more applicable to the government school system. So when we're talking about expenditure, which the NEP is going to incur, it's more for the government school system. Infrastructure is assumed for private schools. And our entire presentation today, at least mine, and I'm sure even Vijay's and even Suvina's, or many others, is focused on what can we be doing in the private schools. For example, even in the critical thinking and the higher order thinking skills that we're talking about, we're so way back in the government school systems, and where do we even begin to handhold them? But we could set good examples and be the model schools where twinning can probably happen, and we can take it forward. So, but the answer to the first question is I don't know, of course, from the taxpayers' money, where else from? I guess is going to raise that money. The second question is, what is the impact on the private schools? I think that's what you asked. So I think that the expenditure part in the private schools, the NEP, as I see it, is the spirit of the NEP, as was captured even in Vijay's couple of earlier slides, was about changing the way the teaching and learning is happening. I don't think we need to put in a lot of money for getting teachers to do research, for example. And I think that's very critical. Can we just get our teachers thinking? Can we get them to do research in a small way? Can we get them to solve their own problems? Money isn't required for that. If the policy is saying that if they are setting up, the government is setting up, I think the biggest hope for me is this whole idea of setting up Parakh, PARAKH, which Vijay was calling about, the same body which is going to set the learning standards. I think they're calling it Parakh because Parakh in Hindi means assessment. To know sone ki parakh to johri hi janta hai, as we say in Hindi, Parakh is authenticity. So Parakh also means performance of assessment and review of holistic knowledge, and that's the acronym that they're calling it. And I think that's the great hope, that if we can set benchmarks and learning standards for children at all grades, and if we can set a culture of research for the teachers, and we do have another document coming up which is going to be setting standards for teachers for their pedagogy. I think we are on a fairly good wicket, whichever government. If we can get this done, we shouldn't worry too much about what else might happen, and let us keep our free thought. Let us practice what we think that we should be practicing in our schools, rather than worry about a lot of discussions and debates outside the schools. Thank you. And I think I will address more of some of this in my own presentation on pedagogy and curriculum after Suvina.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We shall now move to our next key point, inclusivity and universal access. It has never been more crucial to make education a universal right and a reality for all. UNESCO Chief Audrey Azoulay said in the recent report, India cannot deny the sorry state of education in our rural areas and the system at large. Our next speaker, Mrs. Suvina Shunglu, will highlight inclusivity and universal access for all as a major drive of the national education policy. Over to you, ma'am.
Mukul, I'll ask you to open my presentation, but I'll keep talking as you open it. So I feel the NEP is a vision document. It is transformational as far as this aspect is concerned, where we are talking about universal access and equity in education. We don't really need UNESCO to tell us that we are far behind as far as quality education or a large number of children outside in rural areas. When in large parts of Calcutta, We all have these middle class living in, I don't call them colonies, but residential areas and campuses. And all around these campuses are slums. And in these slums, very, very congested slum, you have so many young people, so many children out of schools. When I come back from school, I see outside my home children playing cricket any time of the day, whether it is a Sunday or a working day, from 4 years to 24 years of age. Why are these children not in school? They are in cities. Why are they not in colleges? Why don't they have jobs? It's because they have never had the kind of education, even if they've gone to a government school for a few years, they've never had the education that gives them any skill to be employed. And these are the children who eventually grow up sometimes to be maybe some kind of support staff, or maybe couriers, or maybe wash your cars for you. There is so much poverty in this country, even in the urban areas. So whether it's urban or rural, I think as every citizen, I'm not thinking today only the topic I have, I'm not thinking as a school head of a private school right now. I'm going to leave it for others. I am thinking as a passionate citizen of this country. I can't keep saying that what hasn't happened, the unfinished agenda of so many policies. Can I not look with optimism, with hope, even if it's a little naive, at this policy and say, can we generate national will? I see a fascinating amount of will in school heads, in universities. Everybody's talking about NEP. Is it because of the lockdown? Or have we really realized that after so many 74 years, we're still developing? We still haven't become a developed economy. We have resources, we have hands to work. We have the youngest youth force, which is we are going to be the country with the youngest people in the next decade. You're going to have crime if they are not educated, more crime, right? More poverty, because poverty will lead to more poverty. So can we just open to the next slide, Mukul? I'll quickly, briefly touch upon these because I look upon, and I think all of us as teachers and educationists agree that education empowers people. I don't think anybody disbelieves that it's a tool for the individual and society's transformation, because it taps into human potential and converts in an ability to do something, to perform, to achieve. And as I mentioned, we have a very large young population. It's not enough to teach them speaking skills or just a basic numeracy. We will need to look at some kind of skilling, because unskilled jobs are just going to go out in the next 10 years. We have machines replacing unskilled jobs in the next 10 years. It's already happening. It's already happening. You will notice with a lot of things, examples of things that we used to do, those things are just not available anymore today. And therefore, when we look at the knowledge landscape that is changing, which is mentioned in the NEP, we have all kinds of machine languages coming in, coding, artificial intelligence. And I think that we cannot ignore. If we ignore this, and we need not have a master's in literature or sociology all the time, but we have options for children who can speak, read, write, and can perform technical tasks and can can design websites. Why not? Those are the jobs which will be in multiples. And also, we have a lot of aging nations. We have a lot of nations across the world that have an aging population. India will be supplying, if they can boost up its workforce, it can educate its people. Your people would be in highest demand, of course, with other languages. So there would be a demand if you are able to educate, and that itself would take care to some extent of the inequity in our country, social, economic differences that we have. And this leads to injustice that we see in our country. Mukul, we could go to the next slide. There is the goal for of the 230 Agenda for Sustainable Development that India had adopted way back in 2015. It has a very lofty goal. It says it will ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities to all by 2030. Now, such a lofty goal required the entire education system to be reconfigured and reorganized. As we have already mentioned, that education, when we look at this, develops human potential, leads to scientific advancement, national integration, it becomes a public service. It is a right for every child, which has already been established by the right to education. And it is in all developed economies. It is a right for every child to be educated. At least school education is their right, free and compulsory. No child should be out of school. And I completely with this aspect of the NEP. This also addresses that each child is unique and we develop the potential of each child differently, and therefore the multiple options, languages also is be kept with a large number of children who've not grown up in urban settings in private schools. They're really looking at, it's difficult, it's complex, but that's why they're opening doors. Maybe every town can have 3 different or 4 different kind of language schools, maybe not one. Of course, it will lead to polarization. I agree with you. So that I think, and then this touches upon the cognitive and foundational literacy development and early brain development. As we know, about 85% of the development of the human brain, according to Piaget, is by the age of 6. So this area of the NEP becomes very, 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 very important. I'd like to come to the next slide, which just gives us a little touches upon, which I think Mr. Gupta has already touched upon. So I won't spend time, but this is not the first time we've talked about universal education for everybody, and therefore it becomes almost very important for everybody to pitch in and see what is it that we can do also. What can every private school do? Can we support 2 government schools? Can we mentor them? Can we ask our teachers to train teachers in these schools? How is it that we can help, right? We are privileged. We get our salaries at the end of the month. We have walls around our school. What is it that we can do? Can each school teach one more school? So the NEP 86, before that, there was the Kothari Commission, and then in 92 it was revised. And then Professor Yashpal was involved in the NCF 2005, which was quite a wonderful document because it made learning real, relevant, and it brought in a lot of other very, very progressive elements that we are looking at today. And finally, we talk about the Act, which has actually made right to education free and compulsory for all children between 6 and 14. I believe this age has also been revised in 2009, and this was implemented on 1st April 2010. This is a personal short anecdote because it's relevant. Our school started in April 2010, and we had to make a lot of presentations on the right to education and how this would impact a private school that had not even started. And how would you give education to 25% of children free without clarity on how you would get recompensed by the government for it? However, the West, because being on the concurrent list, this was never really applied strictly in West Bengal. It was applied, it was reinforced, it was enforced in other states, but it was never enforced. And whenever I spoke to principals across schools, they said, keep quiet, is what I was told. However, we come from a group of schools that talks about, we run a lot of free schools, and therefore I spoke to the MMIC in education, Mrs. Shashi Panja, and we adopted a KMC school. Why I'm telling you, it's because it is a government school, and it was under this policy of in Bengal called Each One Teach One. So we picked up this school, but we found for 3 years we tried to work with languages, numeracy, and we would send our karate, art teachers to make learning fun. We found that the children were different every day. The same set of children did not come to school. And at the beginning of every term, like after the winter holidays, if you would go back, the whole lot of children had disappeared, and they would only come on the day we went. If we went thrice a week, they would come then. No teaching was happening. We also felt very unwelcome because the teachers, they didn't want us to come. There were a lot of things that were happening that shouldn't have happened. They only came for the food. Either they came for the food, and so all I'll say, we got out of it and we opened our own free learning center after school from the slums around our school. We have 100 children. It's doing very well, and we're gradually pulling in some children, even though RTE has not been. So I just feel that if we have that passion, that for every child that we take, why can't we take? So I'm talking about enforcement. If we can inspire each other and see, yes, we can do it, the kind of satisfaction we will get out of educating these children, I'm sure that the purpose for which this aspect has been mentioned will be achieved in 20 years, if not in the coming year. Mukul, I'll go to the next slide. So I think this is quite clear, but because Bias had asked me this question, that some schools were wanting to know if every school will need to have a pre-primary section. I kept this specially because of that the Anganwadis were actually started primarily as nutritional centers, so that children would get enough nutrition in the rural areas, and they would be taken care of socially for a few hours when they come into school. With Anganwadis, there are Anganwadis which are co-located with primary schools. Third is the pre-primary section that you may already have in a regular school. And then you have the standalone preschools. The standalone preschools have been a largely unregulated area. From a family running a preschool, you have international chains running in India with international curriculums in the preschool. I think it's a welcome. I mean, the kind of education I've seen in preschool, some excellent curriculum, and I've seen some where they do nothing but prepare you for a big school. They just start making every child who comes to our school knows A to Z. And I said, I don't want you to know A to ABC. I don't know why you're being taught ABCD. And they're writing in capital letters. Why will you write in capital letters? When we begin writing, we write in small letters. They're not ready for writing at 3. Their motor skills are not ready. So basically, there is a lack of research and I think regulation at this level, and I think it's good. So there should be some basic standards set up. So as far as I look at the structure, Bias, I don't see the need for every school, because they've given you the freedom to decide whether you want to keep a pre-primary section in your school or you want to have a preschool which is separate. But the age has been defined, right? From 3 years, 3, 4, 5 years, and earlier it used to be 6 years of age coming into class 1, right? So from 6 to 7, 7 to 8. Now, in between this, there is going to be a 3-month period. If we can just go, I don't need to talk about the other levels, so we'll go to the next slide. There is a play-based 3-month this prior to the age of 5, each child will move to a preparatory class or Balvatika, that is before class 1. And NCERT will be preparing it. And so to see whether there's readiness. Many years ago, I spoke to somebody in the NCERT when I started this school, and they say that class 1 turns out to be the most difficult level, class 1 and then because the child is not learned, and suddenly in 1 he's supposed to read, write. It's very difficult, especially if parents haven't gone to school or they're first generation learners. A lot of children learn things in the informal way at home from their parents. They learn conversations, they learn language, they learn how to read at home as well. But if children are not going to a proper preschool, which are developing the curiosity to learn, which are developing how to learn, they should be like a sponge. They're really like sponges at this age, and they will absorb what you give them, right? So it should be something, this is important. So we kept our class 1 with the pre-primary. When we started school, with this feedback that one, so the pre-primary, we make sure that there is a handoff from the pre-primary to class 1, which is gradual, which is transitional before they go to a level where they're supposed to read, write, understand, and do comprehension. So the first two areas of universal access to early childhood, if you look at this, is the universal is that from 3 to 6 years, it's really talking about access to free, safe, high quality EC. Obviously, they've completely ignored the private unaided school because we are not talking about them, because you're not supposed to give everybody free, high quality education. This will not apply to you. This is going to apply to government schools, right? So don't panic. Foundational learning curriculum divided into two groups, age 3 to 6 in the pre-primary, which will be according to early childhood care and education, and then the class 1 and 2, which would be in a school which could be separate or could be part of a regular school. This will be flexible, it will be multi-level, it will be play-based, activity-based, and inquiry-based. And it will be jointly carried out by the Ministries of HRD, Women and Child Development, Health and Family Welfare, and Tribal Affairs. If we could just move to the next slide. Thank you. So I wanted to talk about the PISA test. Why has this panic? We've always heard about the PISA test, and this is a global measurement system, as most of you would know. And this was basically organized, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. I'm not sure if you know that, but India withdrew in 2009 from this testing.
Yes.
We do not have any testing since 2009 because we ranked 72nd out of 74 countries. And this survey revealed the gaps in language, maths, and science. This was the primary testing. There was language comprehension, maths, and science. And therefore, I thought the country, I think those who were steering the education education and curriculum and policy realized that they needed to do something, and they came up with something called National Achievement Survey. And the National Achievement Survey has been testing the competency levels, not rote learning, in different states. And Chandigarh is one of the states where they've been working very closely, and they have their own survey in every state. And in 2021, India is again going to go back and see, have the learning achievements, has the outcome changed than before. So we are going to go back for this. So there's obviously been a very dismal kind of performance as far as these testing is concerned, because our systems were completely rote-based. They weren't testing that at all. So if some of the things, you'd like to know, and it doesn't test students on memory at all, and it evaluates the application of knowledge through primary and secondary education and maths, reading, comprehension, and science. And therefore, it becomes very relevant to the NEP, as Devika ji will be talking about it, that all these changes were necessary to figure anywhere in the global learning system. So here again, all the different things that we need to do, build schools, so promote both government and non-governmental philanthropic organizations to build schools. Now, I think I'm not going to comment about that. I think we all understand that multiple pathways to learning, formal and non-formal. I think this has been done for the first time, the non-formal education modes. They're going to make a data bank of all retired educators, retired bureaucrats, and everybody is going to be asked to support teaching. It need not be, you have to be a teacher to teach. All of us are equipped to teach children. And that I think a lot of teachers do even after they retire and even after in the evenings. And that is what they're going to do in an organized way. I don't think they're talking about any remuneration, but as a service to your country. And I think this is a wonderful idea, because I see when I travel outside our country that every young person in the UK puts in a few hours of service for old people. And I met so many old people in museums and in art galleries, and they were all accompanied by young people who was spending a few hours with them because they like to do that voluntary service. They don't have to be social workers to do that. And it's time for each one of us to be able to give back in some way or not. So I feel that we will have to do it and we don't have an option. Bringing back, retaining students in school and bringing back the dropouts, alternative centers, and they're talking about tribal areas, they're talking about socially and economically disadvantaged groups which are remote, which may not have enough schools. And they're also talking about peer tutoring. Mukul, we can go to the next. So interestingly, the framework again is the NCP FECE is the National Curricula and Pedagogical Framework for Early Childhood will be drafted by the NCRT. In the last few years, NCRT has come up with excellent books for science and maths. We have, as an ICSE, ISC school, also referred to a lot of concept-based. So I'm not recommending, but I'm saying there is research happening. And till middle school, I have seen some good science books that have come. They're very reasonable. So they're good books for our teachers to refer to, even whichever book they may take. We shouldn't bank so much on the volume of content. It's the evaluation that we also need to look at. And the research and best practices will then be aligned with the latest research on ECCE, national and international best practices. Now, I think we mentioned this, that the ECCE would obviously have, and foundation would have a combination of things like colors, shapes, counting, numbers, puzzles, a lot of using all the playway activity method, added to which they would use the local crafts, the drama, puppetry, music, and movement. I think we already do it in our private schools. We do use the Montessori methods, the playway methods, and combine these in our schools. And mostly the preschools are extremely engaging, fun. Children love to come. And the learning outcomes have also been, I've seen increasingly in a new school, we had a lot of children which were first generation learners in English. They've all come a long way in these 10 years, I feel. So I just feel that we need to spread this concept to all schools. It's primarily applying to schools that were not functioning in this way. And the school cooperation model also we have talked about for 3 months. We can move to the next. Mukul, we can move to. So this is again talking about it talks about what would you put into your curriculum that would develop curiosity of the child. Would you take him for a walk outside and ask him to mention 2 things that he hasn't seen? Would you show him a book, right? So would you relate it to life? When you tell him a different kind of a bird, would you show him on a video? Would you take him out? So I think there would be broader parameters, and one would need to transact within that, which is good, because earlier it isn't about just writing your A to A, your alphabets and your numbers, but understanding the concept and being able to use them in life. Then as I mentioned, the arts, crafts, so different aspects of the brain would be addressed: relationship with nature, play-based, discovery-based learning, ethics, self-identity, etiquette. So one other thing. So we're talking about some kind of value-based teachings, which I think through storytelling, through little role plays, we often do that. And I think that's what they're doing. Every school needs to do that, not just for entertainment, hearing a story or listening to or doing a puppet show, but the end talking about it and say, what did you notice? Do you feel you could do that? So getting them to think a little deeper and teaching them about behavior, teaching them how to behave with each other. And I think that's the greatest, something the greatest feature of coming to school is socialization, learning to work and be with so many others. Otherwise, homeschooling was fine if parents can do homeschooling. But the idea that you're not the only one at home, that you get your parents' attention all the time. A teacher has 30 children, 35 children. So learning to be part of a group, waiting for your turn, listening to instructions, following instructions, all are some beautiful little skills that they learn in the pre-primary. So we move to the next, Mukul. So we're talking now about literacy and numeracy by grade 3 in mission mode. So here are some new ideas that have been promoted by the NEP, and I think we're really looking at language skills and numeracy or maths as such. So there would be a national mission of foundational literacy and numeracy. And I think they have to have very specific learning goals for each year. There is a study like in Peru, they have, a child in class 1, end of class 1 going to 2 should be able to read 60 words in a minute. So we have to have very specific identifiable goals. Or he can read well is not good enough. We need more specific, and that is the research that is happening, which will need to be benchmarked for all the years right till class 3. And that is why they're talking about an exam in 3. It's not an exam. It's to see whether the child can do this or he can't do this. Now, we already have exams that happen which happen under the NIOS. The OBE exams happen in 3, 5, and 8. And we are actually working with some children who can't do mainstream work. We have children who work at their own levels and they're improving on what they know. So you may be in 5, but you haven't done the class 3 exam yet. So OB is, I think they're looking at that is what I feel. So I think I'm good. National Repository of Diksha, high quality teaching and learning resources. These are digital resources. Digital resources are coming in a big way, and we've been using e-content. Some wonderful content has come in. Otherwise, also school libraries, and which would be used by all in the cluster as such. One more sheet, I think, Mukul, and then we can end. So I think the bottom line of this, we are talking about to ensure that how all children can attend school. There's no child that live on the borders of cities, marginalized, or they live in villages. Every child has a right to certain basic education, and that education should ensure whether they are farmers or they are artisans, that they are looked upon with dignity and they are respected for what they do. And obviously we have to see, I work with one of the companies in the advisory council, I think it's a Tata company, and all along their factories, they have these tribal villages near Kharagpur. It's a Tata factory, and there, the children's their needs are completely different. We can never do what we are doing here in school because they come from various tribal. So there's no question of teaching them in English. You have to teach in the mother tongue. You have to teach in Nuria or in the Santali or in any other tribal language that they will learn. But along with that, we also have to see, are they getting ready for employment? Because when children come to class 5 or to 8, we have a huge percentage of children who drop out of school primarily because they don't find that education relevant to their lives. There is nothing that they're doing in those textbooks that relates to their life. We cannot close our eyes to this largest section of our country. So we need to curtail those dropout rates. We need to look at holistic education, and therefore urban education must also become less theoretical. It must also become. Vocational and technical education has not really happened. We've got technical institutes separately. But I must share an example from my school that I started a design lab 3 years back. I always felt that SUPW was wasted if a teacher went back into the same class and taught them something about life skills. This is with no disrespect to my teachers. They were teaching them things, but it was always talking and telling them how to fold things or maybe do some non-flame cooking. What I did was we divided these children into the design lab and the tinkering lab. We started 2 labs together. I will tell you, this is a class where nobody is absent if they have a design lab. They are so enthusiastic, and when you get into the lab, you'll find they are wearing, they're wearing special glasses so the wood doesn't go into the eyes, and they're busy with carpentry. They're busy making circuits. These are children from well-to-do families. They need an opportunity to work with their hands to apply themselves. So application-based learning is extremely necessary, and I think that is the way forward. And NEP, to some extent, is bringing that about. Ensuring that there's sufficient and effective infrastructure in government and co and other areas, alternative and innovative education courses, counselors and social workers to track. Also to involve community, alumni, senior citizens, retired professional. I mean, in no other country do they retire you at 60. I mean, my brother said 70 is a very common age to retire. And if after that we retire, not because we can't work, because we won't get our benefits. So we retire. And the benefits are much more. So all I'm saying is that a person has so much to give at 60, 60 to till you're physically able to do so. And quality attention, quality education, relevant education to their life is the only way to retain children in school. Even a free lunch you will not be able to retain children. And therefore you have many multiple pathways for learning in this. All these are suggestions in the NEP. I had written a few more points that I think we need to make sure that their schools are safe, and other areas that they have infrastructure for girls and for all kinds of children. We have schools in Khatshila, which is again tribal areas, where we have 20 schools which are free schools. Children had to walk for 30 kilometers, but they would come. Why? Because they would also carry one vegetable from home, and they would cook in the school. And these are not government schools. These are from our trust. We run these free schools, and all our paid school pay for these free schools. That is whatever comes goes to pay for these. We have almost 50,000 children studying in these schools. And we have to upgrade the existing and enlarge all the schools. And largely, I think the teacher training becomes very important. They are also looking at selecting teachers who have a knowledge of the local languages. And these are the multiple pathways that not only the regular boards, but the NIOS and the state open boards also should be open for that. So we are not talking, I think anybody in a family in the city where parents have a job, and most children will go. They will not go to the top elite schools. They may go to a middle class, a different kind of a school, a larger school. They will all go. We all understand the importance of education today, and so in the people around us. But a lot of these children are dropping out of schools, and we are not able to retain them in government schools, and that is what we need to look at. And I think in my presentation here, I think I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That was very well put out, and I think you've answered almost everything that there is in inclusivity, and it gives me hope that someday we shall have a literacy rate that sets a new benchmark. I think Mukul has a question from the audience for Mr. Chakraborty.
Sorry, are you asking if I have a question?
Mukul has a question for you.
Mukul, you have to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Sorry. Audible now?
Yes.
Right. We have a very interesting question from one of our audience members. I'll show it on the screen. I would request Mr. Chakraborty to take up this question. If you can see, education policy doesn't need to address elite schools, which are already well run, but the bottom of the pyramid. These goals are wonderful, but how can the NEP address the most fundamental problem in government schools, truancy amongst teachers, that is their failure to even turn up in school regularly? Sir, over to you.
The issue of truancy of teachers is how should I say? It's a bugbear. All right, almost 25%, from what I understand, what I've read, almost 25 to 26% of teachers bunk school. You would have thought students would do that, but teachers are doing it. And the practice in West Bengal, where you sublet your responsibilities to somebody else and vanish, is an even greater crime. So the issue that's raised here about teachers bunking school, teacher absenteeism, this is a very live and a very practical issue. I have no doubt about that. The NEP doesn't say much about that, except to say that the effort will be made to raise the quality of the intake of teachers. And hopefully, if we have teachers who are committed, if the intake is done properly, hopefully this issue will be solved. At the moment, let us face facts. Okay, let us be very candid about it. How many of us actually, or how many of us teachers actually get into the vocation because we want to teach? Most of us need to get into the job because we've got nothing else to do. We are, for one day, for some time, we're selling refrigerators, then we're selling medicines, and then something doesn't click, and then you do a 2-year B.Ed course or something as crazy as that, and then you come in and then you branded as a teacher. This is a fact of life, which is affecting the quality of teachers, quality of teaching. That is the reality. Now, in order to overcome this, the only way is to improve and raise the quality of teachers coming into the profession. The NEPs does say that, and as Vijay said, in fact, I think Vijay highlighted that. I think the issue is not so much what we have in our policy. The issue is one of how will we get there? How will this be implemented? Yeah? I hope that answers Mr. Basu's question. Mr. Basu is an old caller, is he?
Thank you so much, sir. Yes,
I thought as
he
much,
is an
yes.
old polite, and yes.
I'm sorry, I just ran away from the discussion for a little while because there was a stunning sunset outside my window. I just ran around to take
Lovely.
a picture. I'm sorry about that.
No problem, sir. Sir, I would ask to answer another. I think, yes, you're muted.
Tell me.
Go on.
Yes. So, like we are discussing about universal access, I just have one question. Why has it not been a concern till date? And even if it has, what is different in the NEP this time that is going to make universal access possible?
Are you asking me that question or are you asking
Yes, sir.
Suvina?
It's,
You should answer that
sir, I'm
question.
asking you, sir.
Asking me.
Yes, sir.
Suvina.
I think you're stirring up the conversation, am I?
I think we can redirect the question to ma'am. I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
please, ma'am.
I think you
Yes.
would be better qualified to answer that. Yes.
No,
Yes, Suvina,
I
ma'am,
think
what-
we'll get a new angle. I've spoken enough. We'll get a new angle to it if you speak. I think it'd be nice if you are, because this is the unfinished agenda. It's a very tall order. You know how many crores are out of school? So it's a huge, it's not that, what I'm just saying is we can't be cynical and says we can't do anything about it.
Right.
They
Right.
have risk, I'm saying we need to make a start. We need to make a start, and we also need to get back to the government and say, this will work, this will not work. I don't think we need to be quiet. There are willing, because when this draft NEP came, it was sent to all ICSE schools. It was sent to CBSE schools. We've had so many meetings over this. A lot of things have got changed also. It's
That's
not
right.
exactly, I still have the draft with me. So it's not exactly the same.
So it
There are
was
things-
inclusive.
Yes. So they are thinking of some creative ways. A lot of things will get answered if they include, they actually stick to their plans of the 6%. And because that helps people, enables people to come into the profession. You see, you can get more talent, young people. And I think when I was just talking to you about Ghatshila, because they don't get teachers there. It's a tribal area, a little underdeveloped, very underdeveloped actually. So we have to send teachers from Calcutta to train the teachers there because they're young people. But now that they have basic education, they respect becoming a teacher. So a lot of them are going back to organic farming, which we are teaching them. We're not teaching them to only sit for the IAS or become a lawyer and things. There are children who are interested, right? And we don't want to disappoint them. But the whole idea is, can you work with solar panels? Can you work with a gobar glass plant? Can you work with some kind of innovation there? So we have technical schools attached to these schools. And we have, I send teachers down sometimes, but I'm not able, not everybody is ready to go, you see. So a lot of, whatever we feel shortage of teachers in Calcutta or Delhi and Bombay, but there's still nothing compared to what it is in the villages. Here we'll say, oh, their diction is not all right, or they're not looking at how to make the subject fun for the children. They're not very creative, right? But the problem is huge when you go to the rural sectors. So it is a tall order. I don't think there is anything, no reason why it hasn't been done. I think we need the will to do it. Yes, Vijayji.
Yeah, I just want to add, because this question was about government teachers. I think in this country, I don't know whether it happens in other countries as well. Once you get a government job, okay, you tell yourself, now that I have a government job, no one can throw me out, and therefore, even if I don't do any work, nothing will happen. And therefore, I don't know whether it happens with other governments as well. But in this country, a lot of people are just vying for a government job because they have told themselves that once I get a job, I won't work. I'll just get salary. And therefore, how do we solve this, especially with the teachers? Maybe one suggestion which keeps coming is that, is it possible to make the job contractual? That this job is for 5 years, and we will evaluate performance, etc., etc., and based on that we decide. And therefore, I think in the US and also UK, there is a system of license, okay, teaching license, okay, which is applicable for private schools as well. That once you become a teacher, okay, you are not teacher for life. There, you don't have to do anything, and therefore that license has to be renewed, has to be renewed. And therefore, I don't know whether that kind of system will work. But in this country, I think teachers are very important. Government teachers are very important lobby. I don't know whether this will happen. So my guess is that probably government schools, as far as this issue is concerned, will continue to be like that. I don't have much hope.
But the 100 hours, they've added something for training of teachers, a compulsory number of hours of training every year. I think
that has happened. For example, CBSE, ICSE also has these things. Has that improved the quality of teaching? I don't know. So the issue is not only about quality. Right now, government school, the issue is about truancy. That people don't show up, even if they know.
May I just say something? Okay, and maybe then we can also move forward. I just think that one of the things that the NEP is saying about this is that I don't know how much that will help, but they are talking about fewer transfers of teachers in the government sector. So the NEP is very strongly saying that let us not transfer teachers all the time. Just one of the reasons of truancy is also because they are never in their place of residence. They are sent to very remote areas, and they keep taking leave and they keep going back home. So the NEP does mention this also, that more stability of teachers by not engaging in too many transfers. This is something that I wanted to just call out from the NEP regarding government schools, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for all your opinion. We shall now move on to our next point of discussion.
I think Mr. Chakravarti was wanting to say something.
I think we should move.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Unmute,
Sorry, sir.
unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
No, carry on, please, because I think we were running out of time. But I just wanted to say that the idea of the contractual teacher's work is fraught with a lot of danger, especially for the contractual work. I have had this experience in my own school where we introduced teaching and finally had to withdraw it because there are several issues that impinge on his social, his financial, his life as such, even as a worker. He's on the constant threat, and it's an idea, but I've, in my own personal experience, it hasn't worked too well. I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry. Let's just carry on, please.
That is very true, sir. Moving on to the next point of discussion, it I will Mrs. Devika Nadik will now be addressing the point curriculum and pedagogical framework. I think it all comes down to what and how children are going to be taught in classrooms and also outside the classroom. As one key point here is building a curriculum that does not differentiate between academic and non-academic. I am personally very excited about the future of education in India. So let us hear from Mrs. Devika Nadik for more clarity on the subject.
Thank you, Bias,
Over
and
to you,
thank
ma'am.
you, Mukul. Thank you. So this is a StreamYard application which I am attempting, and I want to actually do my presentation myself, Mukul, even though I have mailed it to you,
Absolutely, ma'am,
because
absolutely.
because my presentations are highly complicated, and I'll have to keep telling you click, click, click. So let me just see whether I can do this myself. So I'm just going to share screen, and then I say share screen and. All right. Is it visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
All right. So just tell me this again because I really want to do this,
Ma'am,
and I don't.
you need to
Yeah.
share the screen. Is your PPT open in the background?
Yes, it is in my taskbar.
Then once you share your screen, in the option that comes front, you need to choose application window tab.
Just a minute, please. So I go to share screen. Um, Share entire screen. Shall I click on that?
No, ma'am.
Application
No,
window. Application window.
there is an application window. You click on
Yeah,
that.
I
Do
did
you see
that.
PowerPoint slideshow as one of the windows?
I see Chrome tab. Should I take that?
No, ma'am. Is your PowerPoint slides minimized by any chance?
It is there in my taskbar.
Ma'am, you need to maximize it first.
Okay. Then
Just make it open, and then you see among in your application window, you will see your PowerPoint slideshow as well there as one of the windows that is open.
how can I see anything if my PowerPoint is maximized, Mukul?
Ma'am, then in that case, you will have to show your entire screen in that case, ma'am.
Okay, just a minute. I'll let me try this myself. Okay.
Yes, please.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not able to do this, but I'm
No, ma'am,
feeling a
you are
little
okay.
frustrated.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
see this? Your mail is open. You need to open your
No,
presentation.
I just have my presentation in the taskbar. I've got it open. How do I get you to see it on the screen share? I don't know.
Ma'am, should I help out in that case?
All right. I'm not going to be comfortable, but I don't know what else I can do. Mukul, just let
Ma'am,
me try once
if you
more.
want, can I walk you through this once more, ma'am?
Mukul, let me do it once more. I'm first,
Please do.
just
Please.
listen to me. I've got my presentation in the taskbar at the bottom next to the Chrome sign. All right. Now I'm clicking on share screen of StreamYard. It's giving me screen sharing tips. It says screen sharing is easiest with two monitors, works best on a good computer. Don't show the
Ma'am,
tips.
ignore
And then it says,
just
ignore
click
that.
the option. Share screen. Yes.
I'll just
Share
share
screen.
screen.
Just click on the button. Yes.
All right. Now I've got an option which I see us on the one screen, of course, and I also
Yes.
see application window, and I see your entire screen, and I see Chrome tab. Where do I click?
Ma'am, when you
Application
click
window?
application window, do you see your PowerPoint slideshow or anywhere over there? After you click on application window, it shows you the windows that
No,
are open on your computer.
no. Well, this one doesn't show it. So it doesn't show it. It just shows me the StreamYard
All
window,
right.
which is open, unfortunately. And let me see.
Ma'am, that another reason for that could be that you have minimized your. It may be there in the taskbar, ma'am. I'll just request you to open it once. Keep it in
I've
full
opened
view
it.
in your screen, and then
I've done it.
yes. Now you go to your. Let it be open in the background. Now you go to StreamYard and try again the same process with application window.
Okay. All right. Now tell me whether you can see it. Just a minute. Okay, I've got it. I've got it. Can you see it?
Yes, there, ma'am.
Okay, there I
Yes, we
am.
can.
So persistence pays
Excellent.
was the first thing that we need to know. All right. All right. Wishing everybody a very happy Independence Day again. And what Bias and Mukul have asked me to do is share the aspect of curriculum and pedagogy in schools. So I'm not going to be touching upon higher education at all. My presentation is focused entirely on the curriculum and the pedagogy in schools. And Suvina, my friend, has covered quite a bit for early childhood education as well as up to grade 3 almost. And we had a consultation that I would take it beyond. But the thing is, I'm not really focusing on any particular grades. I'm just talking about what is the NEP calling out in terms of content, in terms of pedagogy, and in terms of assessment, because that is what is the bother that all of us have right now. And that is something that we can do without really thinking and extrapolating on which government will do. We can directly start thinking about what can I do in my own school, in my own way, and that's which is in my hand. So it is the Independence Day, and actually, I just love the fact that the NEP is really upholding the Constitution of India. This is an extract directly from the NEP, which I have on my left, because it does say that the purpose of education system is to develop good human beings. That has to be the end goal. Like I often like to say that the purpose of education cannot be very different from the purpose of life. And that's why it does call out rational thought and action, but it still focuses on compassion and empathy and courage and resilience, as well as a scientific temper and so on and so forth. So you will find throughout my presentation and also in the NEP, which I hope you do go back to and read if you haven't done it so far, there is a beautiful balance of content as well as values, as well as thinking skills and so on. So to begin with that, let us look at what are some of the features of the NEP, where these three ideas of what is going to create quality education is focused. Now, a lot has been said by Vijay as well as by Suvina, and I think it was coming in from Sunirmal and others, that this country learns by rote. So let us see first, how are they changing the focus on the quality? So it does bring good cheer. I'm not quoting and I'm not taking extracts from the NEP. I'm trying to present this in my own way and the way I have understood it, because it's focusing on the quality of teaching, and that's been highlighted by Vijay as well as Suvina. So my presentation is going to focus only on curriculum and pedagogy. I'm going to try and stick to the 20 minutes which I have been given, but if I do exceed, please bear with me. And I'm not going to again say what has been said already by Suvina and Vijay, but I do have it down as this new system of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, which is actually a 15-year schooling process and not a 2 plus 10 plus 2 that we had earlier. So, but let us go to what do we mean by quality of education? We have said this for a very long time. We haven't done anything about it. But let's see once again, what is this country currently and where do we want to go? So this seems to be a dramatic shift, but again, it's not a new thing. We have been complaining about this and haven't been able to do much. India learns by rote, is what I like to say. In fact, most of us grew up this way and struggle to make a lot of sense of things around us. Like a friend of mine said to me today when I was present, I was telling him that, I'm presenting on the NEP this evening, and he's in a very high university in the country. He said, oh, the point is that if we shift away from rote, then the students won't know what to write in the exam at all. And that's how rote this country is. So we grew up like this, perhaps not comprehending, therefore, a lot of things and a lot of wondrous things around us in life. Probably also missing a lot of opportunities for productive work. Like I also give the example of if you were to give everybody who's logged in today a pen and a paper and ask them to just draw a scenery, a scene. Every person logged in today will draw 2 mountains, a sun peeping out of that mountain, a couple of birds flying, a palm tree, mind you, a little hut, and so on. That is our idea of a scene, because we have also made art rote in this country. Everything is rote, and we are saying that we need to move away. NEP is demanding that we move away from this system and focus on higher order thinking. So most of my presentation is also going to be on higher order thinking, and they are specifying analysis, critical thinking, problem solving. And we talked about critical thinking in Vijay's presentation, which means challenging all thoughts or also respecting and appreciating some other thought. And therefore, this NEP also tells us to move away from content cramming to a lot of thinking. How do they suggest we do this? So in content, they're saying that reduce the content. So NEP is saying reduce content. How much and what they are going to reduce, we don't know yet, because the textbooks are going to take a couple of years to come. Although the good news is that they're going to come in a lot of languages. So we don't know what they mean by reduce content, but they are saying that reduce the content and therefore will create space to focus on thinking skills. And I've already mentioned those. I think the good thing is multidisciplinary thinking, teaching and learning, and I'll talk about that, as well as I like the idea of self-regulated learning, because that's what is going to make us learners for life. That's about content. About the pedagogy, what they're saying, what NEP says, that refashion it. And we need to teach children how to think and not what to think. And I think this is the dramatic shift. And I think the Prime Minister also, if you've heard some of his lectures on the NEP, has mentioned this about teach them how to think. And that's the whole problem. We do not really teach our children to think. We don't even allow them to ask us questions. All the questions in Indian classrooms are asked by the teacher, and the children raise hands to give chorus answers. And this NEP is saying, you teach them how to think. And so I'm going to try and explain how we can do that. What about assessment? Assessment, they want it to be continuous and formative, but well, so was CCE in the CBSE, which was saying continuous comprehensive assessment, and which is formative in nature. Of course, mapped to the learning outcomes of the reduced content as well as the thinking skills. I think my problem is that I don't think teachers have understood the idea of formative assessment at all. So most of the schools, even though they were saying summative assessment and formative assessment, all the formatives were also summatives, because the spirit of the formative assessment was never understood. And I'm going to make an attempt to also bring that out, because my entire presentation is on just three things: content, pedagogy, and assessment, and what is the NEP saying, and how can we start. So I like to do this a little pictorially so that it goes home, because our brain stores all information in images, and that's the way we might remember. So I have captured everything from the NEP. I've gone over it with a tooth comb again and again and captured everything in what do they mean by content. And then the next two slides would be on pedagogy and assessment. So I like to begin, now this is Shikshangan's way of putting everything into a framework. So we say that the content, which is what do we teach, which is going to be reduced content. Once we decide that, we decide the pedagogy, that means how should I teach? And it goes back in a loop to assessment, because it is formative assessment. Because it is formative assessment, it also gives me the opportunity to go back to the pedagogy to see that why is it that the students didn't get it? Is there something that I need to change in myself as a teacher? Which is why it is a teaching learning cycle of content, pedagogy, and assessment. So what are they talking about in content? This slide will speak only about content. So they look at it as concepts, of course, as skills, of course, as well as values. I've taken our good old framework of KSA, that is knowledge and skills and values, or the concept, skills, values, etc., that we are also familiar with. It's there in the NEP, but it's embedded. They're not calling it out as concept, skills, and values, but I've tried to make an attempt to put everything that they're saying in these three buckets. So what are they saying in concepts? They're saying that all the subjects will remain, but only the core essentials of the subjects would remain at the school level, as well as the higher education. They've added something. They've added knowledge of Indian traditions and values, and I'm personally pretty proud and happy about that, regardless of which government it is. So that is about the conceptual understanding. Have they said anything else? Yes. They're also saying that let's also talk about contemporary knowledge and contemporary concepts. So though they're talking about Indian values, they're not saying stay rooted in the past. So what is the contemporary knowledge? They're saying Let us try and get our students to understand about artificial intelligence as well as about design thinking. I know that a lot of schools are already doing design thinking, including Suvina's, because we've worked with her school and have had the opportunity to see the design labs. And I know that schools in Pune, some of my schools where I have worked before, are also doing a lot of work in these areas, but they're calling it out as contemporary knowledge. Then in skills, they are, of course, focusing on the higher order thinking skills. So which are the higher order thinking skills? They say critical thinking. We've talked a lot about this. Of course, creative thinking, because first you do a lot of brainstorming, create a lot of ideas, and then zero in on the right idea from creative to critical. It is the same as divergent thinking and convergent thinking, or popularly now known as lateral thinking from De Bono, which is creative thinking. And the critical thinking is, so there's lateral thinking and there is analytical thinking, because critical thinking also brings in analysis. They're also pointing to inquiry-driven education, and discovery-driven education. What else do they say about skills? We already knew this. There are also contemporary skills, and this is interesting. So in the contemporary skills, they bring up mathematical thinking, which I thought was a very, very happy news, because how do we get children to love math and to create mathematical models of everything? And that's what they're calling mathematical thinking. They're also saying computational skills, where they are highlighting coding. That's the new world. Everybody wants to do coding and data analysis, and both of these are interconnected. So you can see how the content is flowing from what we know to what we need to know, and how they are connecting the past as well as the future. And they're not saying stop at something which is probably not of any use to you in your current work. In the values, apart from the values that they are mentioned in the Constitution, which I had as my first slide, they are also, I think, very beautifully highlighting responsible living. And all of us are worried about global warming and the way there is environment degradation. And so therefore, they're calling out holistic health, organic living, environmental education, which has been there for a long time, and global citizenship. They're especially making an entire curriculum on global citizenship and the books. It's already there in the IB and the IGCSE curriculum, if any of us have seen that. So this is the span of the content. Doesn't seem very different, but yet there are arms which are very interesting to me personally, because it gives teachers a whole lot of scope to make connections between what we know and what we need to know, even for ourselves. That was about content. Let me show you in a similar way, what do they mean by pedagogy? So again, we like to put it in a teaching learning cycle of content, pedagogy, and assessment, always going back to pedagogy because it is formative assessment. So in the pedagogy, it's fairly simple. It was more complex in the content because they're adding a lot more stuff there. So they are saying, let it be competency-based teaching. Let there be integration of subjects. I think this is the best part of the pedagogy that they're talking about, and I have something to say in the next few slides about it. They're also saying no silos. So the NEP calls it no silos, that is no separation of subjects from one another, and that's what Bias was mentioning in the beginning, no separation of curricular, etc., and I'll talk about that. Then they of course are calling multilingual teaching, which I completely am enamored with that whole idea of multilingual teaching, because I think that's such a great way of binding this nation together and such a great thing to do for national integration. Then, of course, experiential learning, and we need to understand really what experiential learning is. Experiential learning doesn't mean just doing activities and giving them experiences of boiling milk and making curd and stuff like that. There's a whole cycle of reflection and review also. Then integration of technology in everything that we are doing, development of a scientific temper. And I like this idea that, and this is very clearly mentioned in the NEP, that encourage and promote questions from students, because they're looking at student assessment as self-assessment also later, which I will be showing in my next slide. But before that, what do they mean by integration? Or I have something else there, and I have a window which I can't move away, and I can't read myself what I've written, but I guess it is about the constitutional values that they're talking about. Now, what do they mean about integration of subjects? So they are saying integrate all this together: arts, sports, ICT, as well as storytelling. It's all picked from the NEP. None of these are my own. But I have put project-based learning over there as the biggest call out for doing integration of subjects. There is no other way. You have to do project-based learning to satisfy the need of integration of subjects. And I am going to be showing you an example of how. What do they mean by no separation of subjects? They're saying science and humanities should go hand in hand. Academic and vocational should go hand in hand. Co-curricular and curricular and extracurricular, and all of that should be hand in hand. In 20 minutes or whatever time I have, I obviously cannot go through each thing in detail, but I do want to give you an overview. This is like my maps are like zoom lenses. You can go deeper and deeper and find more and more there. In multilingual teaching, I personally love the idea of collaborative and interactiveness here. I know that the next speaker is going to speak about multilingualism. And I do want to highlight that they're saying that learning is deeper when the student learns through the mother tongue. And we all know that. How to do it, what is the modalities for it, we will see as when the next speaker finishes his speech, and we will have questions. So that was about pedagogy. And therefore, my last slide on the content, pedagogy, and assessment part is about assessment. So again, we never get tired of showing this cycle of teaching and learning, because that's what it is. In assessment, we have formative assessment, we have competency-based assessment, we have assessment of higher order thinking. We're shifting the focus from rote memorization to thinking, focusing on concept clarity and deeper questioning. That's all I have in assessment, but the best thing for assessment called out in NEP is self-assessment by the students, apart from the teacher's assessment, which also self-regulates, teaches metacognition, teaches review and reflection. And that's why I think that's something new that we will need to teach our students. From which age is something we need to see in the next few slides. So having done with an overview of what is the content and pedagogy and assessment, let's take them up one by one. So what is content? It has to be reduced. Space has to be made for thinking skills, character traits like care and compassion, ethics and reason. Emphasis on multilingualism. Yes, they do talk about Sanskrit and other classical languages as well as foreign languages. I'm personally pretty happy about Sanskrit and classical languages, because in order to understand your culture, you need to know Sanskrit a little bit at least. You cannot understand our scriptures if you do not have any idea of Sanskrit. So the assumption here is that you would want to know something about this country and its and the heritage that we have, regardless of the government which is in place. And there are other classical languages and foreign languages. Vocational education, like Vijay mentioned. But the question is, how do we develop higher order thinking through existing content? Because we're not going to be waiting for NEP to bring out textbooks and so on and so forth. I think the proactive teacher or the proactive schools must begin right now, right here. So how do we develop this is something I want to show. Similarly, for pedagogical practice, I've already said what is it that they require, but I want to focus on the habit of their own thinking, leading to metacognition and self-regulation. I do want to focus on that because this is something we're not doing. We might be getting students into meditation or yoga or pranayam, but metacognition is very different. Metacognition encourages review and self-reflection, and then when you do your self-assessment, you know where are the improvements you need to make to get to the goalpost. How can we start on this practice right away? Again, I will be illustrating with an example for pedagogy. Last is about assessment, and they're recommending formative. We talked about that. Self-assessment by students in addition to the teacher. Here, I think Vijay mentioned state examination for grade 3, 4, and 5. So there is no board examination for 3, 4, and 5. Third, like Suvina called out, is something which they are testing, the literacy and numeracy at third. And there is a very nice idea about best of 2 for board examinations. So they're thinking about two board examinations and you take the best of 2. They're also thinking about, which I like, which is something they probably borrowed from IB, that you give 2 levels of every subject. So a standard mathematic and an advanced mathematic, a standard English and an advanced English for everybody, so that you're giving more autonomy and student choice. And I thought that was also a great idea. So we will need to be adapting our assessment method because this is going to be much, much harder than grading just content. Grading thinking skills is definitely going to be much harder than grading content, and therefore we need to prepare our teachers to be doing this, and I'm going to give you some ideas of it today. So now my presentation is moving to examples of each. That means example of content, example with existing pedagogy, example with existing assessment. So how to think with existing content. I've taken something from class 10 CBSE. I hope this is still there, but I looked at the net and that what is there in CBSE class 10 in English, and I found that this was most appropriate for today. So we know that on midnight of 14th of August, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru delivered what is now really considered as one of the finest speeches of 20th century by any statesman. We all remember this, don't we? And I think today is a great day to remember. Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom, which we have. Question is, how many of us have learned this by rote for elocution competitions and left it there? Now, when we say how to think, what should we be doing with the same speech? And we're doing critical thinking. So when we are doing critical thinking, we are not dishonoring any leader. We are not challenging the thought of any leader by doing critical thinking. I want to share an example with you of someone who's done a sentiment analysis of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's freedom speech. I got this from the IB curriculum, and we need to see how we can do that. A sentiment analysis, which means what was he feeling when he was delivering this? Of course, there is hope. There are nouns, India, since the speech is about freedom. So they're now critically analyzing. When you analyze, you break down piece by piece and measure everything that's being said. The adjective is long and great and many others in the context of the struggle and the difficulties in reaching independence. There is an adverb, never, in the context of the resilient attitude and historic win of a nation against its occupiers. The personal pronoun us, showing solidarity and unity of people. The modal verbs may and shall, symbolizing caution. And you know, there is an entire map of India filled with the verbs and adjectives and the nouns that Pandit Nehru used for his freedom at midnight speech. And heavy analysis being done about why did he say this, why not this, what do you think was going on in his mind? And that is what we teach to think with existing content. Today, the Prime Minister gave a speech from Red Fort. Many years later, that speech will be quoted, 74th Independence Day. But did you see that the news readers immediately started dissecting his speech? Why did he say this? Why not this? There was hope. He was talking about a vaccine. Did he sound despondent? Now, that is done today by the news readers. But what's being said is we need to do this with existing content. How do we think analytically? I've just taken the example of analysis, and that was my example for content. I do have an example for pedagogy, how to think in pedagogy. Again, I'm taking that this is the best thing to do. So I'm taking NEP's beautiful suggestion of integrated approach. And I'm also using the medium of project-based learning for showing you the integrated approach. There is no other way. Otherwise, we will go crazy trying to combine all subjects and, but if we do it this way, then we might be able to maintain our sanity as schools and teachers. So I wanted to highlight that project-based learning is different from doing a project. Doing a project, all schools are doing. Children make scrapbooks, models, etc., etc. They do those projects after the teaching is done. That's not what we mean by project-based learning. Project-based learning means while the teaching is gone, you learn through the project. Okay. So what are the key understandings? Very quickly, 1 or 2 slides. It allows us to approach a problem by tinkering with ideas, information, and techniques from different subjects and perspectives. Many of us have adult tinkering labs, and that's what they should get used for. Engaging with this approach early in life helps contribute to the ability of finding solutions through problem solving and taking decisions later on in life. Okay? And project-based learning has shown that students will gain in critical thinking, in tolerance to ambiguity, in recognition of bias, as well as an appreciation of ethical concerns, as I'm going to show you through one example which I've taken from physics. Actually, I've just taken it from as something to show and demonstrate. All of this is called out in the NEP 2020. So this is not my own, but I'm telling you how we could do it. Here is an example. I think I have just 3 points here that it needs to have. So I'm taking the example of sound. Sound as you learn in music, sound as you learn in physics, sound as you'll see everywhere, here, everywhere. A project-based learning must have one essential question. You can call it a challenging question. I've taken, how does sound impact our lives? A very simple question. It should have an end goal. Understanding the interconnectedness of disciplines when finding solutions to problems later in life. I was just thinking about this. And today, most of us in our homes have a pulse oximeter. We're checking our oxygen saturation because of COVID-19. Now, there is a beautiful merging there of biology and electronics, right? Because they're measuring oxygen saturation, but they're doing it through an electronic device. And therefore, later on, when we want to create such devices and such innovations, we need to be having knowledge of various subjects. At the end of the project, you need to have a public product. Either you create a voice box or a musical instrument, because I'm taking sound, or speakers, or even a report. Let me show you something which I think I personally loved doing this slide for this today, and because Bias said show us some examples. I hope you find some sense here. So I'm taking sound as my central idea for a project, and therefore I have sound waves. But the interesting thing is that when I'm talking about sound and when I'm doing a project-based learning, I can integrate so many things. First and foremost, I will look at the ethical angle and the values of compassion that mentioned in the NEP. And I'm saying that there is a soundless world, and can we look at that and can we respect those? Because later, when I'm integrating, that's the way hearing aids were made, with so much else that we heard. Then there is a physics of sound. There's a transmission of sound. There are sound waves. There are echoes. There are overtones. Echoes, children know. They've gone to the mountains and they shout it out. Then there is a biology of sound. How is sound heard? What is the structure of the human ear? What about the nerves? There is the brain. There is a sense, there is a space in the brain, the occipital nerves, the occipital region, where sound is processed. What about the hearing range of animals as well as humans? I'm only giving you just pointers. For each of these, can you just imagine the exploratory activities that you will develop for this project? And it will go on for months, because a project like this also needs to go on for a long duration of time. Then there is an environmental sound. There are sounds of nature that we know. There is sound pollution that we need to be bothered about. This could be something very exciting. Measuring the decibel range of sounds on the playgrounds, in the schools, in the classrooms, on the roads, in the factories, the difference of sound in the libraries, maybe in the places of worship. And children are doing math when they're doing this, because they would be going to the observatories, they would be going to the weather places here and seeing what is the pollution. They would be doing data analysis. They would be creating bar graphs and pie charts to show all their recordings. So you're also looping in math. Then, of course, there is innovation. We ask them to create models of voice boxes or simple instruments. I've just put in a few things here. And of course, there is the beauty of the musical sound. An essential question could also be, why do you need music in life? For each of these things, there can be essential questions. Right now, I said, well, at the end of the project, they might learn to play one music, or they might be able to study the effects of music on your mood. You have in Hindustani classical music, different rags for different times of the day, because you are in a different mood at the different time of the day. And why have they done it? Why is it that you have 12 notes but 22 frequencies? For those of you who know and have some interest in music, there are only 12 notes, and there are 12 because there is also the sharp and the minor, but the komal and the tivra in Hindustani classical. But you have 22 frequencies. What is the role of the frequencies, which again goes back to physics? And of course, what is harmony and what is cacophony? So I just gave you this example that even now, with integrated approach and with the project-based learning in your kitty, you could do something absolutely marvelous to address so many things about the NEP. And let's focus on this and the positive. All right. So I have one more, but I don't think I have the time. So I'm not really looking at this. I'm skipping it. But I'm going to assessment of higher order thinking. Now, in assessment, I do want to pause on this because this is difficult. because you have to focus on how will the student think for answering this question. Your assessment has to be focusing on that. We are suggesting you should use rubrics. Today, I cannot take you through rubrics, but we do entire sessions in Bias, and even Suvina and all of us are aware of rubrics. It is a most authentic tool for self-assessment that encourages self-regulation also. We need to do that at some point. And by the way, the NEP is mentioning rubrics in assessment. I have seen that. So it's going to come. So might as well prepare for that. Now, I'm going to give you an example that in all my work in India and everywhere that I have traveled across the length and breadth of this country, I have been very fortunate to go right from where you are sitting, Suvina, in Kurseong and Darjeeling to in Chennai and Chengalpet and east and west, everywhere. Number one, teachers never understood formative assessment. That was one. The other thing is that teachers think that higher order thinking questions means difficult questions. This is the other misconception that teachers have, So they just take the Bloom's taxonomy and they look at the lower order, then higher order, and they say, oh, the other common refrain is that, what is this phrase? I've never understood this phrase that teachers have and students have, out of the box. What is out of the box? Sit in the box, everything is in the box. And understand what is difficult and what is higher order. And my example is going to show you exactly that for assessment. So I have again taken an example from school curriculum, as well as from, this one is from English. So for example, if we say these are cognitive skills, I'm going to be checking recall, which is considered a lower order thinking skill, and some higher order thinking skills here, whatever they may be. What is easy? What is difficult? Let's look at it this way, horizontally. Suppose I'm doing Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. I've deliberately taken a fairy tale because even at pre-primary level, you can do higher order thinking. What is easy? It is just recall in easy. Who is the main character of Snow White and Seven Dwarfs? Very easy. But if it is difficult, name all the characters in Shakespeare's Hamlet. But what is the thinking skill you're checking? The thinking skill you're checking is just recall. You're still checking only recall, mind you. You're not checking anything higher order. But if you go to higher order, now this is the problem. And I feel this is the biggest challenge we are going to face in training our teachers to recognize and train in higher order thinking skills and plan our assessment accordingly. Now look at the higher order thinking skills. Why did Snow White's mother want to kill Snow White is a basic question, but I think this one is beautiful. Why did Snow White's evil mother want to be the most beautiful person in the world? Why do you want to be the best? Why aren't you satisfied with what you are and somebody else being better? It's fine. And you don't kill for becoming better. So I think these are higher order thinking skills, even in Snow White. And then, of course, there is Hamlet's soliloquy here. But the end of it is, how do you think he resolves this entire dilemma in his mind? And Shakespeare's Hamlet does not tell you that. It has got to be something that you encourage children to think, but I will not pause on this much. I just wanted to show you the difficulty and ease and what is higher order. All right. So this is probably my second last slide. I have a critique of one thing this is Devika's personal critique. There are many things that we might say, but this one is very close to my heart. So I put it up here. So the National Education Policy supports gifted students. I think this is a wonderful idea because gifted education or students who have special talents need to be supported. But I also believe that all students have talents. Everybody has something special, and therefore I've put it in my critique. It supports gifted students. It says that there is innate talent to be nurtured and developed, and very beautifully, it also includes this in teacher education when they're revamping this. But here is my concern. There is a logical contradiction in the National Education Policy because Suvina said that they're talking about inclusiveness, but the gifted education says it's not inclusive. And I'm just calling out this logical contradiction. What is the logical contradiction? I'm quoting from the NEP that each child has one or more gifts, and that these gifts, every child must be recognized and nurtured. Now, I think this is uncontroversial, and the idea is absolutely commendable. But it also says that a small number of children are gifted while others are not, and that these superior or gifted children should be given an exclusive opportunity denied to other children by taking them through specialized programs. And they mention a lot of clubs. a poetry club, a theater club, a drama club, a math club, etc., etc. I believe this is an elitist idea, and it conflicts with the ethical concepts of equity and inclusion in the national education policy itself. So while I am all for gifted education and I support it wholeheartedly, I believe it should be done for all in the class and raise the bar of thinking for all the children. And this whole idea of bringing them to higher order thinking, I think gifted education simply dovetails into this very beautifully. Just one or two slides more. The challenges, I believe, this is my personal opinion, the biggest challenge is the shift in pedagogy, because we have a very, very underprepared teaching community. Therefore, teacher preparation needs renewed attention. Teachers must be encouraged to conduct at the minimum action research. I think we, Shikshangan, is a big, big advocate of action research, and we're getting teachers to do it in various schools. Start there. Maybe they missed the bus in doing a full-fledged research. But action research is what? You are the researcher of your own problems in your own class. We can do that, and that encourages review, reflection, and metacognition. It creates a culture of continuous professional growth as well. I also have a message for school leaders, because I think that school leaders really need to reinvent themselves as academic leaders. The key responsibility should be, and that is actually the principal responsibility of school leaders, to be continuous professional growth for themselves as well as their teachers. In India, again, unfortunately, many of our school leaders are administrative leaders. They're so busy managing the buses and the textbooks and the uniforms and the admissions and attending the committee meetings and attending various things and meeting parents and admissions and so on, that academic leadership is getting lost. Academic leadership is invisible. It's in the classroom. Administrative leadership is very powerful. It's in your office. And a lot of school leaders have become just administrative. Please pardon me. I think we need to become academic leaders first. Administration, please delegate to someone else. Anybody can do it, but nobody can replace you as an academic leader. So that's the challenge, and that's the recommendation from me. The roadmap, I think both Suvina and Vijay talked about it, but I'm looking at curriculum and pedagogy. NEP says it will be transformed by 2022 to promote skill-based learning and minimize rote-based learning. I think Vijay talked a lot about National Curriculum Framework for School Education and National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education. Both of them, they are targeting 2021, which is very ambitious, but let's see. Textbooks will remain a work in progress. We are expecting them by 2023 because they're doing it in many languages, and which is why I'm urging you, everyone, don't wait for all this. Start. And I showed you some examples of starting. I also want to really keep this open for discussion right now, but I want to also say that I don't know why this is not working, but actually India has got so many beautiful languages, and this particular map, which is currently not working on StreamYard, shows different states and the number of languages different number of people actually speak in our country. So I am done for now, and I'm going to stop my screen and allow Mukul and Bias to take over.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Every time I hear you and Vijay sir talk about pedagogy, I have a deeper understanding of things, and I actually have lost count how many times I have done it. So thank you very much. I think we'll skip a few questions here. We're running a little behind schedule. And my last question will be for Suvina, ma'am. What does the NEP say about teaching children to be, for this segment, what does the NEP say about teaching children to be good human beings above everything?
I think there is a very strong reference to citizenship, teachers being trained in fundamental duties. We've always spoken a lot about fundamental rights, and it's also about diversity. Children should be taught about different religions, different languages. There is a very, very strong reference to that, but it begins with teacher training. Because if you are not broad-minded, you see, you cannot inculcate that in your children. If you don't accept everybody, the way they are, you cannot perpetuate that, right? So I think it's very, very important in this. You cannot have a chapter on value education, be good human beings, don't lie, be tolerant, accept everybody. This is experiential learning. And so the NEP has definitely referred to it. And we as a school, and I think all schools, I learned a lot of wonderful things in my school where I studied. It has to be through practices. It cannot be like a sermon in school. Nobody will apply it in your lives. So we say, care for somebody else, everybody saves some money, and we see how we can use it, right? And I think these are small little practices that each school, urban schools, private schools have already been talking. We've been talking about value education, moral education, but the NEP definitely talks about the country as a whole. It talks about fundamental duties, citizenship. It talks about so many other things like equity, social and economic equity. Why are some people poor? How can we? So these can be taken up very beautifully in the classroom. If I have 30 seconds, I'll just do a quick example. Day before last week, the children have been reading We the Children of India, Leela Seth's book on the Constitution, their take for children. And we give them excerpts in the middle school, class 5, 6, 7, and they had a discussion on the preamble. They had what is fraternity, what is justice, and this was translated into ideas, and then they wrote their own preamble. And it was really fascinating to see the things that they asked for in the preamble. They asked for acceptance. They asked for, to ask questions. So I think that a lot of critical thinking and critical consciousness, compassion can be done academically and can be done through practices in the school, which a lot of schools do. But we need to universalize this, and we need to say that it must be done. So I think we should also check on the emotional quotient of teachers when we employ them, not just academic proficiency. How are they? We don't do that. We don't check, because that's there in the Western countries. All your police records are checked before you can be left in a school with children. So that one aspect we never check in India. Morally, how sound are you as a teacher, right? So the NEP definitely refers to it.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for highlighting on perhaps the most important part of education and very much the need of today's day and age, being good human being. We shall now move on to our final topic for the evening, which is the most confusing and controversial aspect of the NEP, multilingualism. This point of the NEP suggests that students be taught in their mother tongue or regional language up to class 5 and preferably till classes 8 and beyond. We definitely get the ideology behind this vision, but it has its challenges. And Mr. Chakravarti will elaborate more on the subject. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mukul. And good evening, everyone, your viewers, wherever they may be. I need to apologize right at the beginning. I do not have any slides to show. But I'm going to do a general talk, and I hope that you will stay with me for the next 15 minutes. Let me start by stating that the National Education Policy that has been released recently, the NEP 2020, is a vision document. It's a document that strategizes where Indian education is going to go over the next 20 years or so. And by and large, it's a very progressive, a very radical, and has been welcomed by almost every sector of our society. If you've been listening to what Vijay has had to say, or Ma'am Nadig, or Suvina, you will realize that this is a very forward-looking, very positive document. I don't think anybody can dispute or debate that. And for me personally, I honestly think that one of the greatest things that has come out of this, the real good news of this policy, is the fact that the government of India has finally understood the profound importance of early childhood education. And because it has understood that, it has incorporated early childhood education into its policy framework. It's another matter about how they're going to do it, whether the teachers will be trained adequately, where is the money going to come from. I'm not going to go into that. Let us just delight in the fact that a positive statement has been made in this regard. Now, one of the areas, as Mukul just pointed out, that has created a lot of controversy, a lot of conversation, raised debate and discussion and excitement, and confused people is the suggestion that early childhood education should be conducted in the mother tongue or in the local language. Now, first of all, I'd like to just go through what the NEP has to say on this. I think it's important for us to clearly understand what is it that the NEP says. Section 411 to 4.22 in the policy framework deals with, multilingualism and the power of language. And it goes on to say, and I'm quoting, it is well understood that young children grasp non trivial concepts more quickly in their home language or in their mother tongue. And it goes on to state that wherever possible, the medium of instruction until at least grade 5, but preferably till grade 8 and beyond, will be the home language, mother tongue, / local language, regional language, whatever you would choose to call it. Thereafter, after grade 8, the home language shall continue to be taught as a language wherever possible, and this will be followed by both public and private schools. Unquote. Now, I know that Bias and Mukul, you'd be very worried when it says private schools are to implement this policy too, because you are confused as to how this is to go about. And there are three crucial phrases in the quotation that I have just given you. First of all, the first crucial phrase is wherever possible, whatever that might mean. Here, I would like to state the initial confusion arose from the Press Information Bureau, the Government of India's Press Information Bureau's statement, which said that all instruction for classes 1 to 5 will be mandatorily done in the mother tongue or second language. This was then clarified later on when the document was released, and it says wherever possible. The other crucial point to keep in mind is that it says that this is a policy that will be followed until at least grade 8, but preferably until grade class 5, but preferably up to class 8. Okay? Definitely to class 5, but preferably it's to be extended up to class 8. And the third important aspect, of course, is that it's to be followed both in public and private schools. Now, about private schools, I'll discuss this in a moment. All right, we need not worry ourselves too much about it just now. For your viewers, let me just define what is multilingual education. Multilingual education primarily refers to first language first. That is to say, schooling which begins in the mother tongue and then transitions to additional languages. Now, it is believed in developing countries such as ours, speakers of minority languages, and there is a humongous number of languages in India. The speakers of minority languages, that's the non-dominant languages, tend to be disadvantaged in the mainstream education system. The NEP underscores that research clearly shows that children pick up, and I'm quoting from the policy statement, research clearly shows that children pick up languages extremely quickly between the ages of 2 and 8, and that multilingualism has great cognitive benefits to young students, and children will be exposed to different languages early on, starting from the foundational stage onwards. Now, the fact that children are extremely quick to learn languages and that they best comprehend in their own mother tongue is a proven fact. There are plenty of research papers that prove the benefits of studying in the mother tongue or the local language. In fact, there are studies that have been produced by UNESCO suggesting that multilingual education should take place in 4 stages. In fact, the stages that they mention um, is in stage one, learning takes place entirely in the child's home language. In stage two, while we build the fluency in the mother tongue, language two is introduced. In stage three, you build oral fluency in language two and also introduce gradually literacy in language two. And then from stage four, we use both language one and two for lifelong learning. Now, there is another aspect to why I think this is a very good idea. An additional advantage of multilingual education in the Indian context is that it actually enables and it actually empowers teachers who need not be burdened with having to learn English, which is an alien language to a large number of them. Now, why am I saying this? Because we are having this discussion amongst us and in the English language, we tend to think that um, the elite English medium schools are the ones that the government should be worried about. The NP statement, honestly, is a statement of government policy. As such, the policy takes into cognizance a vast segment of our population who attend government schools in rural and urban India. This is the segment that this policy addresses. And if you go back to these schools and you find teachers there struggling to cope with English, you can imagine that their ability to communicate whatever it is that they wish to is greatly hampered. So, if there is teaching in the mother tongue, or the regional language, or the local language, or the home language, this will definitely aid and empower the teachers. Now, so what is my opinion as to what will happen in the private schools? Honestly speaking, whereas the policy statement does say that it will also apply to them, my own hunch, and this is very personal to me, my own hunch says that private schools are likely to get away with just what they're doing at the moment. All right, ignoring that and doing what they please. But I say this with one proviso. And this is where Mukul and Bias and other private school stakeholders need to be a little concerned about. Well, concern may not be the right word, but you need to be alert to this issue. The devil, as Vijay said earlier in his statement, is in the details. And these details are yet to be published. In other words, what are the government rules going to be that are going to be drawn up for implementing this policy? That is the key issue, and that is what will make a difference. The multilingual education approach may also be a step in the right direction for another very valid reason. I think some reference has been made to it in the discussion today, but consider the state of Indian education at the primary school level. Uh, Suvina mentioned that the school in Ghatsila and in those areas where teaching hardly takes place. Learning outcomes are abysmal. Now, let's take a look at an overall situation. For instance, the 2012 ASA survey revealed that in rural India, 45% of enrolled students, 45% of enrolled students in the fifth grade were unable to read a text that was meant for grade two. Those in class 5 were unable to do arithmetic problems meant for grade 2. In other words, 55% of the students in our schools up to class 5 in the government sector, not just the government sector, but in the rural and the urban sectors, in these schools, 55% are not able to read or write to any appropriate level of efficiency. Over half the children are at least 3 grades behind where they ought to be. And this is absolutely pathetic. If we are to overcome this, I cannot but see how we can avoid teaching in the language that the children would be most comfortable with. So, against this background, it's relevant to understand, and once again, at the cost of repeating myself, worldwide research tells us that mother tongue medium education is effective and efficacious. Decades of work, research work, confirms that learning is most effective when a child has 8 to 10 years of, and I'll stress this, of good teaching through the medium of the mother tongue. And I think this is what Devika was stressing on, that good teaching. But the good teaching cannot take place if the teacher herself or himself is unable to communicate what he himself has learned, which is to teach in an alien language. And therefore, it's very important that while there is a gradual introduction of other languages, the medium of education at the foundational level ought to be in the mother tongue. First as subjects, then partly as teaching languages. This will ensure a cognitive foundation for learning non-language subjects. It allows for the acquisition of other languages while retaining and developing the mother tongue. Now, this is exactly what is envisioned in the NEP of 2020. Now, having said that, I would like to do a little critique of my own. What is my personal opinion on what I think is, or what, as you've mentioned, Mukul, the most controversial aspect of this policy? Controversial, I would put it in quotes. My own personal opinion is I'd like to sit on the fence at the moment, primarily because, like I said, the policy per se is excellent. The details, or as I said earlier, the devil lies in the details. That, I think, is something that we need to come to as and when the rules that will guide the policy statements, that the policy statement made now, come into play. I honestly think that there is a need to strengthen mother tongue based mother tongue based government school system. But, and I would like to stress this, but this must not be as a means of rejection of English. Now, I know it's been said before, let us not introduce politics into this. It is not introducing politics, but it's just getting a little, just being a little practical and realistic. To my mind, it appears that there is an effort somewhere to underplay the role of English and not underplay, but to undermine the role of English in our education. And therefore, I go back again. Mother tongue education, excellent, but it must not be introduced by rejecting English, which, by the way, is an Indian language. To suddenly start learning English in class 6 is fraught with tremendous risk of perpetual damage. And here I would like to give you the example of what happened in the government schools of West Bengal. The left-run government, almost 40 years ago, introduced a policy where from classes 1 to 5, everything would be taught in the mother tongue. So in the hill areas of where I live, it became Nepali. And for most of Bengal, it was in Bengali. And then in some parts of Bengal, Urdu was the main language in which children were taught. Suddenly, they had to learn English when it came to class 6. And the children who went through this process, because of faulty teaching, uninterested teachers, uh, teachers not properly trained, in other words, what I referred to earlier, lack of good teaching practices, the children suffered immensely and they continue to do so. Towards the end of its tenure in Bengal, the left front government decided to bring back English into the system. But it wasn't an easy task. And Before the students could be taught in English, the teachers had to be taught. The end result was that these students who had to go out of the state to either study or for employment reasons suffered immensely. Now, one of the issues that have been raised by people about multilingual education and its impact is about this transferability of jobs. I understand that's an extremely pertinent issue. I really don't know how um, this is really going to be solved, which is why I said I'd like to sit on the fence as far as this is concerned. Also, there's the issue of multiracial marriages. What happens in a family where, let's say, the husband is Bengali, the wife is Tamil, and they're living in Karnataka, and then they get transferred to Calcutta, or maybe Patna? That child and that family will have a massive issue to solve. Uh, the Indian situation, the reason why I say this is that the Indian situation, unlike in the West, is a very complex situation because we are a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multicultural uh, country. Take, for instance, we were discussing the other day, just in passing. Take, for instance, just the state of Orissa. Orissa has four major languages: Odia, Bengali, Telugu, and Hindi. And then there are 40 other tribal languages within that state. The state government of Orissa decided that they would, of these 40 languages, take up 10 tribal languages and try and teach the children in those 10 tribal languages. But when we take just those 10, do remember there are 30 other tribal groups that have been ignored. Now, are we going to be able to teach everyone in their own mother tongue, in their regional language, or are we going to go back into one dominant language again, monopolizing everything that's coming up at that level? Again, to go back to the teaching of English, let us not fool ourselves. It is an aspirational language. And for most Indian parents, um, no matter what kind of background you come from, whether you're rich, poor, urban, rural, north, south, east, west, right across the country, there is no denying the fact that English education or is what everybody aspires to get. A very good example, I think I must say this, and I was quite surprised that there wasn't a protest when this really happened. When the chief minister of the state of Delhi decided to order the teaching of English as a primary language, I was quite surprised that nobody told him that nobody sort of criticized him, saying, "Oh, he's coming here with a colonial mindset." But what the chief minister actually did do, I think, was to put his feet on the ground and think in a very pragmatic manner. Also, in terms of the teaching of English language, I look at a particular community. I was listening to an extremely interesting uh, podcast the other day. And in this podcast, the speaker, who himself came from the Dalit community, is now a great research scholar, apparently an award winning research scholar or a teacher in the West. He mentioned that the Dalit community or the Bahujan community, as we may refer it to, look at knowledge of English as driving social mobility. And therefore, to ignore this would be greatly detrimental to those people at that very, at the very lowest levels of our society. In that interesting podcast, and this is just by the way, I should mention this, something that I had not quite considered before this. He mentioned that the great B.R. Ambedkar did not just wear suits and ties because it was his sartorial choice. He was making a political statement. It was very important. In fact, there is another uh, Dalit writer, thinker, I think, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Chandrabhan Prasad, who actually constructed, he went the other extreme. He actually constructed a building and called it the Macaulay Bhavan. And he deified English as a sort of a deity. And the idea was, unless you have this language which pushes you up the social ladder, you will forever be ignored. It was very interesting. My son said to me the other day, he is a research scholar in Hyderabad, but he said to me, it was not just a question of B.R. Ambedkar wearing his suit and tie. But he says, do you notice that every statue that is made of the great man, he will be shown wearing that he's carrying the Constitution in his hand, he wears glasses, and he has a pen in his pocket. The power of education. Let's not also forget that most global research is driven by English. So I think, whereas I agree with the basic contention that at the foundational levels, mode of teaching must be in the second language, in the mother tongue, sorry, not the second language, in the mother tongue or the local or the regional language or the home language. I also believe that it's extremely important to ensure that English, which is an Indian language, is not set aside. I think we need to teach them in the mother tongue, but not, but without ignoring the importance of English in their lives. Finally, the last point that I'd like to make is to repeat the entire thing, to repeat what I'd said before. The policy by itself, nobody's going to question. The policy by itself is an excellent document. How are we going to implement it? What are the rules that are going to guide this? As and when the government of the day presents those rules, I think we'll need to sit like this again for another discussion, because that is going to be the crux of the question. I hope I've been able to come across clearly enough. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing with us your profound views and concerns about the multilingual aspect of the NEP. And like you rightly said, the devil lies in the details. And I guess we will have to wait and watch for the government to provide more clarity on this. The next question is directed towards Mr. Vijay Gupta. I was reading about some important questions being asked about the NEP, and this question caught my mind, and I'm quoting Mr. Anil Sadgopal here. NEP's proposal on mother tongue or home language is confusing as it overburdens the child with the language curriculum, which includes the emphasis on learning a classical language, read Sanskrit, at all stages of education, including higher education, even as classical languages like Tamil and Pali are accorded a stepchild status. Nor does the NEP take any stand against the Brahminical Sanskritization of Indian languages, a phenomena partly responsible for the exclusion of Bahujan children who comprise 85% of the child population. So what are your thoughts about that?
I know Mr. Anil Sadgopal. He did. I mean, I don't know whether you guys know something called HSTP, which is called Hoshangabad Science Teaching Experiment or Project, and he did wonderful work. And therefore, uh, as you can see from the statement, he will be very easily termed as left liberal, urban Naxal, whatever. But I think the issue is that I am looking at NEP only from the quality angle. I think it is a bogey to say that actually quality is bad because language is not appropriate. I believe the quality is bad because we don't have good quality teachers and we don't have good curriculum in place. If we fix that, it doesn't matter in what language we are teaching. Okay, while while this is absolutely fine, mother tongue, home language, and so on, the same document also says that at that age, actually children can learn multiple languages, and therefore language is not the issue. I think we are we are actually barking against the wrong tree or wrong wall, whatever. I think the issue is that how do we make sure that we have a great curriculum, which means we should define very clearly what children should learn, and therefore I'm hopeful about learning standard project. And second is that are we preparing teachers well so that they can teach in that way. If we can do these two things, I think we'll be in great shape. Obviously, there is another long-term issue which will not happen in our lifetime, is that how do we attract our best to come into teaching? That is a generational project. I don't know when it will happen, but whenever it happens. But in the meantime, I think if we can fix the what, and if we can fix the how by preparing teachers well, I think we will be in good shape. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that explanation. Right. It does make a lot of sense and rightly put. I will direct this last question, considering we've exceeded our time slot, to Devika ma'am. Firstly, ma'am, how do we equip our current generation of teachers to suddenly start teaching in other languages? The second part of my question is, what are the skill sets and mindsets teachers have to learn and incorporate to remain relevant? Over to you, ma'am.
So, as far as your first question is concerned, I don't think that there is any expectation that the current teachers have to learn other languages. There is no such mention in the NEP. In fact, since you have asked me this question, Mukul, there is a very beautiful suggestion. Again, I don't know about implementation sitting right now on 15th of August 2020. Okay. But I'm saying that there is a beautiful spirit and there's a beautiful suggestion. Of course, for government schools, maybe more, but they're saying that schools should make bilateral agreements with teachers of other states, of neighboring states. The NEP suggests this. Do read that document, that you could make bilateral agreements with teachers of neighboring states and rope them into teaching other languages. Like so much was being said about Bangla and Nepali and Odia and Garhwali and so many languages which are happening. Same is happening in Maharashtra and many other places. But now I just think that, we could also do that currently because it's all online. So no teacher has to cross the state borders to come anywhere. So what stops you from getting teachers enrolled in your school from other states to teach different languages if there is a need? And I also think that so many people are looking for work today with the crashing economy and whatever we are going through, that people would be only too happy, even like Suvina mentioned, the seniors who have to be roped back into education systems and so on. They'll be only too happy if you give them this thing about, I have a child in my school who speaks only Nepali or only Odia, and could you teach? So that's the suggestion. So I don't think that there is anything about current teachers learning different languages. So that's settled. The second question, I think, was what was it? How do you develop the skill set in the current teachers, right? So I think that there is no escape. I mean, I never get tired of saying this, and you know me enough, and that there is no escape from teacher education. Continuous professional development of teachers in service training, because the pre-service training is not up to the mark. We know it. We've cried hoarse about it. We don't know when it will change. How much time, for how long are we going to remain in our circle of concerns? We need to be operating from the circle of influence. We've talked about that, that we have an influence over certain things. Can we develop our teachers? And that's the only answer. There is no magic wand. There are no teachers out there who are bright, sparkling stars who are just waiting to get recruited by you or by anyone. They're not there. They're not there. But the good news is that you can develop them over a period of time by continuous building of their capacity and feedback, formative feedback for them as well. That's my answer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm just tempted to ask one last question. May I? To Suvina, ma'am. May I please ask one last question? Ma'am, considering we are a boarding school, and even West Bengal, where there are people speaking different languages like Nepali, Hindi, even Bihari, and various other languages, Urdu as well. So how, and especially since we're a boarding school, how do we accommodate if we do have to implement what the government is saying? How do we accommodate different, in which language do we teach? where students come from various backgrounds.
I think every state government, education being the details will be worked out, but every state government will have to really give directions to us about the languages. And I think from the practical point of view, I don't think they're going to do anything that's going to upset what is already happening. At least I'm hopeful. I think we'll have choices. Now, since you're a boarding school and you have children from varied backgrounds, right? You still manage to teach them in English, right? Your transaction is all in English, and you must be adding on a second language, third language, right? So is Nepali one of the languages, right? So I really don't have a clear answer till we get clear directions. But I'm hopeful that the medium of instruction will not be forced. We will not be forced to change it. We will always have a choice. So there are a lot of children, like I've just got some children from Nepal who just come in last week. They're not very fluent with English. They're learning English. And they picked up English in our school. Their mother tongue is Nepali. I mean, I had one child who left. Now they more have come in, and I've just got 4 of them now. So all I'm saying is that if we continue as English is the aspirational language in cities, it's also a tool. It's a means of finding employment in so many countries, in so many places, you know. So it becomes a part of your soft skills. Actually, knowing language is a real advantage, and I would not discontinue with that if I had a choice. If the government gave me a choice that you could choose this or this, I don't think it's going to be forced upon us now, because we are private unaided schools. So as far as you're concerned also, the medium will most likely change in the government schools, because in our state of West Bengal, we've already been told that we must teach Bangla till class 10 by our present chief minister. And actually what has happened is we've added it on as a third language, whether you learn second language, Hindi or Sanskrit. We had Hindi and Sanskrit. Now we've added, everybody must learn, those who speak Hindi must also learn Bangla, which I think is very important. You're born here, you're being raised in Bengal, you should be able to appreciate. So we do a lot of informal teaching. Every cultural event starts with something in Bengali, from Tagore, folk songs, but I don't think it needs to be forced in, you don't need to learn the grammar, you don't need to do so much of literature. I feel we need sensitizing. We must know our state language. I have a huge population of children who don't speak Bengali at home in my school, right? They may speak in Gujarati, Marwari, Hindi, but they're all learning Bengali. One is through the culturing, through some events that we do, celebrate certain days. So I feel this will continue. I don't think there will be, I feel this is more to address rural, and I hope, I'm just being hopeful. I don't have an answer. Yes, sir. Mr. Chakravarti wanted to say something.
Yeah, just to add to what Suvina said, when the Chief Minister said few years ago, I think this was 2017, that Bengali must be taught compulsorily, Bias and Mukul, I hope I can take you back to 2017, though you wouldn't want to, because Darjeeling was thrown into a riot. And we had a strike that lasted 105 days. And the reason there was, again, regional pride. Nobody wanted that the state language should be forced upon the hill people who had a different language, who have a different language and a different culture. But this is the complexity of India. And this was just, by the way, this is not to contend on what you've said. Bengali has to be learned in Bengal, but till today, it's not done in the hill areas, as you know very well. And that is something that the government learned to its own cost. It runs its fingers in trying to do that. So imposition, I don't think any government, whether at the center or the states, will try and impose this on us. I think, and as Suvina said, I think we've got to be sure that there will be no imposition.
Yeah.
Yes, something. I don't know whether you guys are aware that actually some of the state governments in the last almost one or 2 years are converting all the government schools into English medium school. It has It actually started with Tamil Nadu, and now it has gone to Andhra or Telangana, one of them. And therefore, as you can see, even the state governments, which have the political parties which fight on the regional pride and all that stuff, okay, even they are saying that English is what is aspirational, etc., etc. And why should our students not learn English and lose out in the whatever race, employment, aspiration, whatever? So I think this is a flow which has already begun, and therefore very difficult to, I think, actually reverse or change directions.
Vyas, parents are so aspirational when they come to a school like ours, which is not very old and elitist. It's a young school. We take in children from all backgrounds. They say that one of the reasons we want to put our children in our school is they learn to speak good English. But they may not get their child into the old school, the old English school, but they may get a chance in our school. So they actually come to learn the language. So I don't. We will have to cross the bridge when we come to it. But I really feel the medium cannot be changed. It should not be changed so suddenly.
I want to.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add a different angle. I think there is no debate between English or no English or this language or that language. The way I look at it is that the more languages a child can learn, the more are the neural connections fired in the brain. I mean, there's so much of brain research that's coming into education, and we know that the more connections you make, the firing of the neurons is very rapid, and that sort of lateral thinking happens because that's what you do with languages. So if I know 5 words to express one thing in 5 different ways, that's the way my brain fires. And that's also one aspect of language learning that we should look at, and because language is also political. And I mean, actually, your I think your personal is also very political, isn't it? And therefore, language is also very political, and therefore we keep saying this and not that and so on. But also look at its benefits for education and the development of the brain. And of course they will pick up English, and they will pick up all other languages. So if there's an opportunity, let us look at the spirit of that and see what we can do with it. In fact, the tragedy would be that the private English medium schools won't do it, and I think that's going to be very tragic, because the first option will be, I don't want to be burdened with this now, but BS, you must take it up, okay, and everybody else, and teach them a couple of languages. And I also look at it as a very beautiful way of national integration, a strong way of national integration, which I'm very, very, very focused on. And another thing, I think that if not with all the languages, at least start a bilingual approach in your schools. Right now,
but we always teach 3 languages.
I know. I mean,
we always teach 3 languages.
What I meant is, Suvina, all our education happens because it's an English medium school. So there are schools, not yours, but there are schools who punish children if they don't speak in English. I know that. I went to yeah, no, it's very much here. It's very much here. And therefore, I'm saying that, what's this? I mean, at least a bilingual approach. I mean, this is not USA or England that we speak only English. This is the beauty of our country, and we must protect all languages. That's my very, very, very urgent and passionate plea. Not at the cost of not doing English.
Yeah. So I think Vyas and Mukul were concerned about the medium of instruction. That is what we are saying.
Medium is English.
Yeah. We are teaching 3 languages right from pre-primary, and we will translate if the child doesn't understand English. When they come in pre-primary, we will always translate. But it doesn't mean that they change the medium so rapidly. I don't agree with changing the medium, because you already have a great tool in your hand. I don't believe we should let that go.
Thank you.
Yes, just to add one last point to what Vijay said, there's an interesting note that I read, that even in Uttar Pradesh, the government has instructed 2,000 schools to ensure that they become an English medium school. These are government schools. If it can happen in Uttar Pradesh, imagine it can happen everywhere else, because that's the government feeling the pulse of the people. That's a responsibility. As Devika said, it is a political issue, definitely, but it's also a issue of coming to terms with bias. But Bias and Mukul, I know you were very worried about this, but I think, like I said earlier in my presentation, private schools are going to do exactly what they're doing at the moment, and you'll also get away with it.
Thank you very much, everybody. I think it was a wonderful session. The key takeaways, I think the most we learned from this session is the good that we can take from the NEP is how to teach our children to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I think that is the most important aspect here, and then we can let the government decide what they want to do in the future. So, we as a school, we also have a vision and an implementation plan, and we thought why not share with our viewers what we intend to put in place taking from the NEP, and once this horrific pandemic is over, of course, and we'll also allow us to present some of uh, some of which we are already doing in the school. So we will not take much of your time, just I think 5 minutes more. Mukul?
Yes. The NEP talks a lot about teachers training. If our students have to learn how to learn, unlearn, and relearn, we have to make sure we have a strong team of teachers who know how to make that change. We as a school have given teachers training the topmost priority and aim to take our efforts further. Shikshangan, Umid, and a few others have been helping us in this regard.
We also realize that parents are as important as the school in making sure the child is learning well. The school alone cannot make the NEP work for the better. We need our parents to be our allies in this endeavor. We have been organizing sessions for our parents by Mrs. Saloni Priya of Umid Foundation, and she has been instrumental in motivating our parents to be actively involved in their child's education.
Integration of art is something that FLS has followed with great enthusiasm under the leadership of our principal, Mrs. Chanda Das. We have art as a subject in the boards and celebrate art with great enthusiasm and have a dedicated art festival every alternate year that students and parents from around the region really look forward to. We also have a dedicated art gallery.
We are very excited about the emphasis on critical thinking and doing away with rote learning. We have already introduced detailed assessment by education initiatives and Yaruki, a maths learning platform, which are all excellent ways to check conceptual learning. And of course, Devika ma'am and Vijay sir has been guiding us through and through. And all that she has been talking about, she's working with our school to implement it in our school, and we are very happy. We have made immense progress in that field.
Music also being an important art form, we have recently tied up with Ehsan Shankar Lloyd's in an initiative which is called Torrents. And this organization makes sure that every child learns an instrument of their choice, but under a proper and guided curriculum.
Keeping the health is one of the most important aspects of anyone's life, and given the current situation right now, we have collaborated with doctors from school, which is a Mumbai based company, helping us enhance our medical infrastructure with COVID guidelines. They are going to train our medical staff as COVID experts to better handle the situation once the school reopens. This, of course, comes as a sigh of relief, and we're really hoping that the school reopens soon.
Now we shall highlight a few initiatives that we will undertake keeping the NEP guidelines in mind. First, we are pleased to announce that we have decided to open a pre-primary wing for children of under 3 to 5 years of age, and we are going to call it Nursery, a beautiful name suggested by our Vice Principal, Mrs. Chandrani Ghosh. However, we are still waiting on some clarity regarding the medium of instruction.
Second, we are also hoping to open a vocational training center where all our students will learn life skills, and this shall also be open to the public with age no bar.
Given the experience we have had during this pandemic, we will also be focusing on increasing our digital infrastructure, considering that online learning is here to stay. And we have learned that it can be a wonderful tool for learning along with classroom learning.
Lastly, we will be attempting to build an Atal Tinkering Lab (ATL), which is an approach by the central government of India to create an environment of scientific temperament, innovation, and creativity among students. ATL Lab would teach students essential 21st century skills which will help to foster their curiosity and innovative mindset to encourage research and innovation in schools across the country. This brings us to the end of this webinar, and I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the panelists. I thoroughly enjoyed this session, and I'm certain Mukul and the audience will agree with me that it was an absolute pleasure hearing all of you speak. Thank you to each one of you and the audience for taking the time to be here with us today. I will now ask our Vice Principal, Mrs. Chandrani Ghosh, to extend her vote of thanks. Thank you. Ma'am, you're muted.
Good, ma'am.
Where is Chandrani? She can't come up on the screen.
Ma'am, I'm here. I'm here, ma'am. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed every moment of this webinar. So since the essence of all beautiful art is gratitude, I deem it an honor to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Father Leblon School team to all those who have helped us in making this webinar such a resounding success. At the outset, I thank our esteemed panelists for volunteering their time and experience. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. I really liked Suvina ma'am's communication skills, where I was listening to every word that she was talking about. I noted down a lot of what that she talked about. And Devika ma'am, as usual, it was awe-inspiring for me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And Chakravarti sir, he shared his views on multilingualism, and I think it was very intricate to talk about at the grassroots level where we are working. And Vijay sir, as usual, very elaborate and very intricately, he explained about the entire NEP. Thank you so much, all the esteemed panelists. I would like to thank our Honorable Director Sir and Principal Ma'am for their constant guidance and motivation, and Principal Ma'am for her enthusiastic support. A special thanks to Bias Ma'am and Mukul Sir for their unflinching support and coordination. And our heartfelt thanks to our students and parents for their active participation. And it's the audience that makes the presentation awesome. Thank you so much, those who are still having patience to listen to this webinar after it has completed nearly 3 hours of going live. So with a last word of Mr. Rabindranath Tagore, the highest education is that which does not merely gives us the information, but makes our life in harmony with others. I would like to wind up. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Vyas. Thank you, Mukul. Thank you to all the other panelists. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.